Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku was chosen for UA's redemption program? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Kicks open door. First things first, it is important to note that this story was already in the works, and 3 chapters are posted online under the same name Why Are We Here Again? It was mine and Ludi's idea and was expanded upon by the wonderful members of my Discord server. I was busy writing Canary at the time, and the plot making of this story kind of got out of control and I decided to back out of its creation. Personally, I did not like the way the characters were being developed. I made the storyline and stuff and let them roll with it, but they lost motivation. Sometime later, Ludi messaged me to say, do you want to pick up this story idea again and redo it yourself? And I was like, yes, as long as I can go into your plot building Google Doc page with a massive pair of scissors and do some serious gardening. And I got a reluctant yes. This new version is not exactly the same. The plot line is vaguely similar since I made it to begin with, but the characters and dynamics have changed. The original is linked here. This is not the same thing. The first chapter will have the most similarities since I wrote most of it anyway and was later edited by the others in the original. I'm just doing this for fun. Read it, don't read it, whatever you want to do. I have writer's block on my novel, so I'm doing this instead, laughing face. Inspired partly by, but you don't need to know what they are at all. This red versus blue series thing that Ludi liked, but I don't so much, St. Trinian's Assassination Classroom. Do not repost this work on any site. Translations are welcome with permission. I do not accept potfics. I have copyright claimed before and I will do it again. I will remove this story from collections if I think your collection's name is trash. Why? Because I can. Also, image guide to student numbers. See the end of the work for more notes and other works inspired by this one. Chapter 1. How did this happen? Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Why are we here again? Kaminari glanced down at Ciro, his chin in his hands and his legs swinging over the edge of the building. He glumly stared out at the skyline, the night quiet, for now. Kaminari sighed deeply. I don't know, man. It's one of the big questions, isn't it? Why are we here? Leaning up against the barricades, he tried to make out his classmates running around below. So many of us have been through so much and now we're all stuck here together and… No, Kaminari, you idiot. Ciro interrupted suddenly, breaking the peace. Why are we here? We're on a roof in the middle of the night, and you have a bunch of exposed wires. He blinked. Oh, yeah, what was all that about? Did you think I meant meaning of life or something? Are you okay? Fine, really just thinking about stuff. Do you want to talk about it? No, it's… Kaminari froze, his eyes catching the glimmer of a flashlight below, turning on and off. Maybe later, he finished. That's the signal, right? How am I supposed to know? That's what I was asking you in the first place. I forgot. Kaminari hurried back to the wires. I'm short-circuiting the building. You can't just stick your hands in there. Ciro hissed, backing away from the electronics that Sato had ripped out for them earlier. You'll short-circuit yourself. And that's why you're here. Kaminari grinned, giving him a thumbs up. See you on the other side. And with a shout and a flash, the lights went out. Kaminari stumbled back from what was once the fuse box, murmuring nonsense with that blank look upon his face. Ciro simply sighed, taping his friend's arms together and hauling him over to the edge of the building, where they could abseil down. This is going to be a long night. This is going to be a long year, Midoriya muttered to himself, staring up at Yue. The massive, H-shaped building towered before him. The sunlight reflected in the windows. He had to avert his gaze from the blinding light. It was painful to look at. The heat was bound to be stifling in there with all that glass. Their air conditioning better be good. The gazes from the other students already resting on him were bad enough. He ducked his head, marching forwards and trying not to catch anyone's eye. That's it, he was inside. Home for the next, who knows how long. Midoriya certainly didn't. For Midoriya was a member of UA's infamous Class 1A. In a world of superpowers, also known as quirks, those who held the greatest strength rose above the rest and were hailed as heroes, holding back those who used their powers for ulterior motives, the villains. And of course, with rising crime rates, schools were established to raise heroes to fight for society. But UA was unlike any other hero school. There were 3 years here, but the first year was the smallest. In the second year, Class A and B were both hero classes, with C and D in general studies, etc. But the first year was half that size. Class B was the only hero class, C for general studies, D for support, and E for business. So, where did that leave Class A, you might ask? Class A was the villain class. One day, some official looked at the data and decided that most villains started on the road to darkness when they were only teenagers, like Midoriya. And it was only getting worse. There were kids with dangerous quirks, kids who fell in with the wrong crowd, kids manipulated and turned against the heroes, kids who tried to be the hero themselves, illegally. That official said that, well, they could train more heroes to combat the growing crisis, or they could hit the problem at its source. Find a way to stop people from taking that dark road at all. UA was a prestigious school. Its entrance exams were tough, and classes just as challenging, but it produced outstanding heroes. If you couldn't get in for the first year, possibly because you didn't have a flashy quirk or the skill to use it yet, you had a chance to enter for the second year, providing you had some outstanding references and grades. You could even transfer from UA's General Studies department if you proved you had what it takes. And then UA talked to that official or group of officials and said, if we take in a class of delinquents from across the country, we could train them alongside our brightest, with heroic teachers and outstanding resources, and turn them around. The program was a success. Some of the greatest support tech designers had graduated from UA's Class A. Outstanding underground heroes had been produced, and overground ones too. Then let's not forget businessmen and women who could twist the market around their pinky finger with the world of experiences they had gained from UA and beyond. But if you failed Class A, that was the end of the road for you. You'd be sent back to whatever hole they pulled you out of. Most often, Juvie. Class A was your last hope. And Midoriya, he didn't belong here. Because in a world of superhumans, Midoriya was the opposite. He didn't have a quirk, nothing at all. Quirkless, useless, pitiful Deku. And here he was, the red bands of Class A painted onto his blazer, the large number 18 on his back. One of 20 would-be villains and thugs. Why was he one of them? Why was he here again? The room was deadly quiet as he slid the door open. He wasn't the last to arrive, which he was thankful for. More so when he realized Kaken hadn't turned up yet. He sat down on the desk, which had a new PE kit marked 18 sitting on top. 18 basically seemed to be his new name now. He stared blankly at the front of the room, waiting for the dreadful day to begin. More arrived, slowly but surely. Each had their own remarkable story to tell, Midoriya was sure. Kaken arrived eventually too. Midoriya quickly turned away from his furious stare as he stomped across the room and threw himself into the seat in front of him. Great. Just great. Of course, Kaken had to be number, why couldn't he have been? He always saw himself as number 1 anyway. I'm going to be the greatest hero this world has ever seen. Blah, stupid Deku, go die in a ditch, blah blah blah. Huh, good luck with that now. You'll have a black mark on your record for the rest of your life. Even if you do make it into Class B next year, the world will always see you for your time in Class A. You'll never be number 1. Never. The time ticked by. The classroom filled up to the brim, every seat occupied. Midoriya didn't dare to glance around at his classmates if he could even call them that. This was nothing more than a prison, at least, that was what it felt like. The trackers strapped around their ankles didn't help to convince them otherwise. Midoriya wasn't the only one who flinched when the door was finally flung open again. Outside was a man who couldn't possibly be their teacher, right? But he waltzed in regardless, long, greasy, black hair, tired eyes and dull clothing, a bright yellow sleeping bag slung over his shoulder and a white scarf around his neck. He let the sleeping bag drop to the floor, the soft thud filling the silence. Good morning. His low, gravelly voice greeted them. I am Mr. Aizawa, your teacher. Midoriya felt his sweat drop. For such a tired, done-looking man, he radiated a strange intensity. That didn't stop Midoriya giving him a weird look when he pulled what looked like a fruit pouch from his desk and drank, most of it whilst staring back at them. You all know why you're here, he sighed, tossing the empty pouch into the bin beside his desk, which already had a decent number of packages within it, despite this being the first day of class. Midoriya was tempted to say that, actually no, he didn't understand why he was here. But that would mean speaking out in front of everyone. He wasn't ready for that yet. He had to figure out how this classroom worked first. A prolonged moment of silence reigned over them before Mr. Aizawa continued. You can graduate Class A at any time. All you need is my approval, and you will be immediately transferred to Class C, General Studies. But you have to earn it first. Another minute of silence passed as Mr. Aizawa looked every one of his students in the eye. Midoriya hated how he lingered on him for a little longer than the others. Pick up your PE kit, the teacher instructed. I'm taking you down to the changing rooms, then I'll meet you out on the green. Everyone got up with varying enthusiasm. Midoriya could already see who they were from the way they walked. How some seemed to cower and shuffle past, how others stood tall, chin raised in defiance, as if saying that this place had no hope in changing them, or perhaps that it was an honor to be considered bad enough to get here, whilst the rest didn't seem that bothered, like they knew they'd end up here anyway. Mr. Aizawa followed them from behind, calling instructions out to those in the lead as to which way to go. They'd all individually been toured around the buildings and facilities anyway, that's why they all arrived at different times. Midoriya hadn't been listening or paying attention though. He had been too lost in his own thoughts. Now it looked like he'd get lost in this maze of a school too. With orders to meet him past the door on the other end of the changing rooms, Mr. Aizawa left them to it, allowing the boys and girls to separate into their respective rooms and wandering off. Midoriya got changed as quickly as possible, not wanting to be shut in this situation for a second longer than necessary. He just needed to make it through to graduation, however long that ended up being. Maybe Mr. Aizawa would soon see there had been a mistake and let him transfer to general studies. Yeah, he could see himself there, sure, why not? Diminute Kaken. This is all your fault. Whilst Midoriya scampered towards the exit, he walked straight into terrifying-looking number. He glared down at him over the top of his blue mask, and a third eye appeared on his tentacle-like hands. Midoriya just laughed nervously and backed away, giving him a wide berth as he made his way towards the door. Aren't you going to get changed, 15? Someone suddenly called out. The loud noise made Midoriya jump. He turned around to see bespectacled number 4 waving his arms at this number. Midoriya met eyes with 15, and his blood ran cold. There are no cameras here, he said whilst Midoriya backed out of the door. I'm not here to make the hero's life any easier. Midoriya heard nothing more. He marched away, not wanting to get involved, and soon found himself standing by some of the girls, before Mr. Aizawa. His mind wandered back to the changing rooms. Student 15 was Shoto Todoroki. Midoriya used to be a fan of heroes. He knew all about him. Well, even if you weren't a fan of heroes, you'd still know about Shoto Todoroki, the son of the number 2 ranked hero, Endeavor. It was a great scandal. Todoroki was supposedly kidnapped by a scarred villain named Dabi a few years ago. There was massive media coverage over it. When he was finally caught, Dabi slipped through the cracks, and Todoroki had a newfound hatred of heroes, specifically his own father. Of course, he'd end up at UA. Where else would he go? He wasn't exactly a murderer like Dabi, but he was still a villain of sorts. But of course, Midoriya had to end up in his class too. He didn't ask for this. For God's sake, it hadn't even been an hour yet, and this was already a nightmare. Time went by, and most of the other students arrived. But not Todoroki. Eventually, Mr. Aizawa went to get the missing student himself. And after way longer than necessary, Todoroki seemingly gave up and got dressed, meeting Mr. Aizawa outside and walking as slowly as he could over to the rest of them. Line up, Mr. Aizawa sighed, and they did just that. In your number order. A confused minute of shuffling later, And Midoriya found himself between a guy half his height who kept ogling at the girl next to him, and Kaken. Because the universe just hates him. Get used to who you're standing next to, the teacher instructed. Whenever you line up, it will be in this order. Be quicker next time. Great. There are 3 reasons for you being here, said Mr. Aizawa, walking up and down the line. Firstly, your quirk could be dangerous. Numbers 1, 2, 7, 10 and 14, we will be working on gaining better control of your abilities. You will graduate when I believe you are no longer a danger to yourself or anyone else. Secondly, vigilantism. I know it sounds honorable. I know you believe you are doing the right thing, but it is illegal. In the eyes of the law, you are villains, not heroes. Without training, restraint and skill, you could have caused more problems than you fixed. Numbers 3, 4, 6, 8 and 9, you will graduate once these messages have truly sunk in. He stopped in front of them all, sighing deeply, that makes 10. The other half of you are here for villainous behavior. Argue with me all you want, it won't change a thing. Midoriya clenched his fists. That's what they really thought of him? A villain? That wasn't right. He didn't do anything wrong. It was Kaken who was meant to end up here, not him as well. But it had all backfired so horribly. For all the planning and everything he'd thought through, this was not an eventuality he'd even considered. You will graduate when I believe you understand why you ended up here, and when you can see a better path to the future. Well then, Midoriya was going to be stuck here forever. Reach the end of the school year without my approval to move on, and it's an automatic fail. Midoriya gulped. Do I have to explain what that means to you? No one answered. But every single one of my students graduated last year. Let's see if you have what it takes. And then the dreaded words were uttered, quirk assessment. And Midoriya knew that this was the beginning of the end for him. It was bad enough at his old school, Aldra Junior High. It was bound to be worse here, where half of his classmates were basically villains. The second they knew he was quirkless, it would start all over again. He'd gone through all that effort into ending it, once and for all, and it had boomeranged right back into his face. Well, at least Kaken was here. Not that Midoriya was particularly thankful for the familiar face. It was more because that was Midoriya's aim. He wanted to get Kaken into Class A. His old friend was going to make an excellent hero, that was for sure, and Midoriya had no doubt that Kaken would transfer to Class B before long. But he needed to learn a little humility before that. He couldn't be a hero and a tyrant. Kaken was heading straight towards a life where he'd just be a bigger, crueler, meaner version of his middle school self, a bully with power. Class A would teach him the difference, right? With the added bonus of him likely being unable to make the highest hero ranks. Of course, Midoriya never planned that he would also be in Class A. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Mr. Aizawa suddenly said, interrupting them as the first 2 made their way to the start of the sprint exercise. Last place in this assessment will get immediate detention. There was a murmur of complaint that Midoriya didn't dare participate in. And for you, that means helping Class B wash their dishes tonight. Mr. Aizawa's terrifying grin made the prospect seem far worse than it probably was. And all of a sudden, Midoriya had a newfound motivation to do well in this test. But that didn't stop Kaken accidentally blowing up in Midoriya's face whilst he used his quirk for extra speed in the sprint. It certainly didn't help when he almost burnt through Midoriya's shoes whilst he was supposed to hold his feet down during a sit-up exercise. And Midoriya was most likely still sitting dead last when, in the 800 meters, Kaken tripped him up and Midoriya got a face full of concrete. Midoriya caught Mr. Aizawa's gaze after he stood back up, rubbing the blood off the gash in his cheek with the back of his sleeve before he carried on. Somehow, he still didn't come last. Number 17, Mr. Aizawa called out before they moved onto the ball toss. Why don't you use my DMN name? Kaken hissed. At the moment, you're not acting like someone that deserves it, Mr. Aizawa droned with no remorse. Care to explain why you're treating 18 like this? That's a nasty cut on his face, and don't think I haven't noticed all the scorch marks on his clothes. Midoriya felt the rest of the class eyes on the back of his head. He kept his gaze on Mr. Aizawa. Kaken simply snarled, I'm not doing anything he doesn't deserve. Midoriya didn't say a word, didn't move a muscle, didn't avert his eyes. I know how the two of you ended up here. Neither of you will be going anywhere until you can find a way to work out these differences. Especially you, 17. Well, Midoriya really was going to die here. At least he was taking Kaken down with him. Detention, Mr. Aizawa snapped to Kaken. And don't come last, or else you'll be doing 2 days in a row. Midoriya was 100% prepared for Kaken to immediately take it out on him, since once again it was his fault. But the fact that he just clenched his fists, seething in silence and glaring at him from the corner of his eyes, almost made it worse. The rest of the assessments passed without any problems, which just made Midoriya nervous. Especially when short, purple-haired number 19 ended up scoring incredibly high in that side-to-side jumping activity. Midoriya was doomed. He was going to end up in detention with Kaken. It was even more of a punishment. Okay, here are your scores, Mr. Aizawa sighed, and with the touch of a button, the leaderboard appeared as a hologram before him. Midoriya winced, preparing himself for the worse, before slowly allowing his eyes to gaze up and find that he wasn't last. 15, a detention. Next time, put in a little more effort. Todoroki didn't seem so bothered, but Midoriya was relieved. He wasn't last. He was third to last. The invisible girl hadn't done as well as him either. Well, it made sense, considering her quirk didn't give her any advantage in these tests. Although Midoriya couldn't see her from her clothes, she seemed just a little smaller and weaker than him. Number 20, I expected more from you. I won't let it slide next time. And 19, I'm watching you. Well, that wasn't ominous at all. The tall girl with the ponytail number 20 glared down at 19, the short, purple boy. Gosh, Midoriya really needed to learn their names. Mr. Aizawa handed a note to Midoriya. Head up to Recovery Girl and get that scratch fixed up. I assume you know the way. Midoriya nodded, even though he didn't at all. His teacher turned back to the rest of them. I need all of you to be trying your hardest if you want to hope in graduating. This is your first warning. What about him? 19 pointed up at Midoriya, who flinched at the sudden proclamation. He didn't even use his quirk. 18 doesn't have a quirk. Well, that just happened. You barely scored higher than him, 19. I don't know why you seem so smug about it. You're on thin ice. 18 put in more effort than most of you. Any bigotry towards someone's quirk, or lack of one, will not be tolerated here. Do you understand? Midoriya blinked. He hadn't expected that. I said, do you understand? There was a chorus of, yes, sir. Before they were finally dismissed, Midoriya almost ran back to the changing rooms. He got changed so quickly that most hadn't even made it inside before he was gone, ready to roam the maze in search of Recovery Girl. Maybe this won't be so bad after all. But that was only the beginning. Kaken being in detention was a blessing to Midoriya. At the end of the day, him and Todoroki were scooted out of the Class A dorm. Heights Alliance, a pretty name for a place which was essentially a prison, and Midoriya was left in peace. Prior to which, they were shown around the dorms, given an extensive list of rules: no turning off the lights around student 14, no touching anything marked with a pink number 2, no leaving the dorm after 9, and allowed to unpack. Another good thing for Midoriya was that for once, the numbering system hadn't been used when assigning rooms. This was likely because of the need to separate the girls from the boys. But Midoriya was simply happy that he wasn't next to Kaken. It wasn't so great that 2 out of the 5 students with dangerous quirks were on his floor. He had a sign stapled to the back of his door, explaining that if he dared turn off the lights in the corridor at night, student 14's shadow monster quirk could lash out and potentially kill them all. Oh, and his neighbor, student 1, had a laser in his navel which could leak out at any given notice. Have fun with that. And his other neighbor was perverted student 19, who kept trying to talk to him, and Midoriya really would rather not encourage that friendship, especially after how he'd called him out on his quirklessness in front of the entire class. Midoriya flopped down onto his bed with a sigh. He'd unpacked everything already, from the various boxes that had been brought up to his room earlier in the day. He didn't bring too much, just the norm: clothing, bathroom necessities, stationery, and an array of notebooks. He wasn't allowed his laptop or phone. He didn't bring any posters to make his room look a little less drab either. He used to have a lot of hero merchandise, which made his bedroom look like a small shrine. He didn't bring any of it because, well, it didn't exist anymore. A few months ago, he'd sold most of it off and thrown the rest in the trash, ripping the posters angrily off the wall and bringing some of the plaster along with it, but that was the fault of Blue Tack. His notebooks used to be full of hero analyses, but he didn't have the heart for it anymore. He left all 13 of those at home, including the one with the number 1 heroes, All Might's signature inside that Kakin had burned up on the day it all went wrong. His new notebooks were all completely empty. He supposed he should find something to use them for. And well, a life full of nothing but analysis directed him towards one thing. This was why Midoriya picked up the first empty notebook he could reach and began his work. Before long, 20 double-page spreads were set up, one for each student in his class. Now, he just needed to find the information to fill it up with. What did he know already? Well, there was him, Kakin, and Todoroki. Those were the only names he could add. Oh, and there was what Mr. Aizawa had said, certain numbers being here for dangerous quirks, some for vigilantism, and the other half for villains. Midoriya didn't think he had many talents, but even he couldn't deny that his memory was excellent. And then they had warnings for each of the dangerous quirk students. On the first page, he made a quick content section. Dangerous quirk, naval laser. Dangerous quirk, acid, pink girl. Vigilante. Vigilante, with the glasses. Villain. Vigilante. Dangerous quirk, electricity. Vigilante. Vigilante. Dangerous quirk, something to do with sugar? Villain. 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 Dangerous quirk, shadow monster. Shoto Todoroki villain, ice and fire? Villain. Katsuki Bakugo Kakin, villain, explosive sweat. Villain, short, purple guy. Villain, girl with the ponytail. Well, that wasn't much. But he wasn't going to learn anything else by sitting in his room. Midoriya sighed deeply, shoved his notebook and pen under his pillow, and braved leaving his room. The dorms were eerily quiet. The solemn atmosphere sent shivers down his spine. Everyone else must have been thinking along the same lines as Midoriya, because when he arrived in the common room, he found it was completely empty. They must have retreated to their rooms immediately and hid away, seeing everyone else as villains and all-round dangerous people. But the silence was better than a majority of the alternatives Midoriya could think up on the spot, so he wasn't complaining. He collapsed onto the nearest sofa for a while. The dorms were nice, considering the situation they were all in. Everyone acted like ending up in Class A was the end of the world. It was made very clear that finding yourself here was not any sort of prize or thing to aim for. Despite the poster child results from some graduates, a majority don't end up becoming anything significant. Midoriya would rather be anywhere than here. Perhaps the bad reputation came from the UA Sports Festival. The event was world-renowned. Of course, there were plenty of similar contests in other countries, but UA blazed the trail. Essentially, the hero students duke it out and the world has the chance to watch their heroes in the making display awesome power. Usually it's the second and third years you want to watch. This is where the future heroes make their mark. But the first-year event was a different spectacle altogether, and this was because of the inclusion of Class 1A. With half the number of competitors, the sports festival for first years might seem less interesting, but when a class of the most promising hero students in all of Japan are pitched against a group of juvenile delinquents, it really did seem like heroes versus villains. Everyone watching cheered and clapped for Class B, whilst booing and hissing at the grim-faced members of Class A. It was as though you were publicly shamed for ending up there, like a group of clowns who never wanted the job. Perhaps, if Class A weren't portrayed so badly on television, some desperate individuals would get into trouble on purpose to end up in the class. After all, you do get some remarkable opportunities after graduation, namely transferring to UA's other courses. If you make it that far. Midoriya had to get out of here before the sports festival. Before the world saw him as the useless, quirkless, would-be villain that this school seemed to already think he was. He turned on his side, trying to banish the depressing thoughts from his mind. That was when he came face to face with a large whiteboard spanning the wall opposite the TV that separated the abandoned kitchen area from the rest of the common room. He got up and wandered towards it, picking up the black pen that lay waiting for him. Spread across half of the whiteboard, he wrote down the student numbers, leaving blank spaces at each. By his, Kaken's and Todoroki's numbers, he started writing their full names. As he was writing his own, he heard footsteps. Hesitating on the kanji, he turned. Finding himself facing stern number, he walked right up to him and gazed at the names Midoriya had already added. Nervously, he finished his own writing, before realizing number 4's hand was outstretched to him. He gave him the pen, and watched as he added his name. Tenya Ida. He knew that name, he just couldn't pinpoint from where. Putting the pen back down, Ida held his hand back out to Midoriya. Tenya Ida, nice to meet you. With a gulp, Midoriya took his hand and shook it. Aizuka Midoriya, and you too. Nice to meet you, I mean. Ida gave him a soft smile and nodded, before turning back to the whiteboard and gazing at the blank spaces. I see you know 2 of our classmates already, he realized. Oh no, just one other. Kaken Thunin Bakugo. I've known him, well, forever, really. I just recognized Todoroki, student 15, from the news. Of course. I recognized him too. He doesn't seem particularly pleased to be here. Well, does anyone? Midoriya laughed, rubbing his head nervously. I suppose not, Ida sighed. But I am thankful I have been given a chance here, at least. I don't know what would have happened if not. Midoriya wavered. He didn't know if it was a good idea to ask yet, but, how did you end up here? If that's okay to ask. You don't have to answer, I'm just interested. It's quite all right, Ida replied, waving his right hand about in a chopping motion. It's only natural to be curious. I would bet that everyone here has quite the story to tell. Midoriya nervously cast his mind back to his story. No, he still didn't reckon it warranted sending him here. He supposed he would find out why, eventually. Have you ever heard of the hero killer, Stain? Ida asked. Yeah, Midoriya answered immediately. 2 seconds later, his eyes widened with recognition. Oh, you're... Yes, Ida sighed again, pushing his glasses further up his nose. That was me. I was foolish. I got what I deserved. Permanent nerve damage in my right hand, and a sentence here, for vigilantism. More noble than me, Midoriya shrugged. And, for what it's worth, I think it was really brave of you, standing up to him for your brother. Ida stiffened, and then nodded. Thank you, but I don't deserve it. A hero should never act in revenge. But that doesn't stop the hatred. Yeah, I get it. He cleared his throat. And you? May I ask why you're here? Well, you see. Hi there. The 2 boys turned. Before anyone could say anything more, a bubbly girl with a brown bob haircut swooped in between them, picking the whiteboard pen up off the floor and adding her name to the list. Buchako Uraraka. This is a cool idea. Calling everyone by numbers feels so weird, she shuddered. I'm Uraraka. Sorry, did I interrupt? Oh no, it's okay. Midoriya stammered. And Midoriya, and this is... Tenya Ida, greetings. His hand was in that stiff, plank-like position again. Midoriya wondered if that was a result of his nerve damage. It's super nice to meet you, she grinned. Student 5, so, not a dangerous quirk or a vigilante. But, she seems so nice? Why was she marked as a villain? How's your face? She suddenly asked. Midoriya blinked at her for a moment. My? Oh, you mean the scratch. Yeah, fine. Recovery girl was nice. She assumed I got into a fight though. She wasn't incredibly happy about it. Yeah, that 17 guy was so mean, she huffed. Yes, you're number 18, Ida realized. I recall Mr. Aizawa mentioning there was an issue of sorts between you and 17. Bakugo. Midoriya rubbed his head nervously. We're not the best of friends. Well, I was secretly glad I didn't end up in detention with him, nodded Uraraka. I bet you are too. He nodded without hesitation. You have no idea. Todoroki did not lead a good example of the effort we should be putting into this class. Ida suddenly snapped, as if he'd been thinking about it all afternoon. He most certainly deserved his detention. I just don't think he wants to be here, Midoriya pointed out. Frankly, I don't believe many of us do wish to be here, the statement was repeated. But that wasn't Uraraka. Another girl had appeared. She snatched the pen from Uraraka's hands and scribbled her name down. Momo Yaoyorozu. Ah, it was the girl with the ponytail that Mr. Aizawa had also told off for not trying hard enough. Unless any of you are exceptions? She asked pointedly. Not really, Midoriya replied quickly, not keen to get on her bad side. She seemed a little less tense after that. Perhaps she was just nervous and didn't show it well. Would any of you like some tea? It was a rather sudden change in attitude. She went from a menacing, purposely cool-sounding person to someone quite timid and unsure. That would be nice, Midoriya replied first, despite the fact that he didn't really feel like having tea at the moment. Her smile made it worth it though. I don't know what's available, she admitted, hurrying over to the kitchen area, but I shall have a look. You know what, said Uraraka, maybe this place won't be so bad. Kaken's not back yet, Midoriya reminded them bitterly. Kaken? Ida and Uraraka repeated simultaneously. Jinx! Uraraka yelled. Ida didn't understand. Oh, I mean Bakugo, number 17? Sorry, I've just called him that ever since we were little kids. It's a habit. Ah, that's sweet. Uraraka beamed. I'm going to call him that too. No, Tino. Seriously, he'll kill you. Midoriya warned. There was an evil glint in her eyes. I'm going to do it. He'll also kill me but, to be honest, that's no different than usual, Midoriya moped. I have the tea. Yaoyorozu called out. I usually have mine black. Does anyone want milk or sugar? It's fine like this, thank you very much. Midoriya smiled as politely as possible. She still kind of frightened him, and the nicer he was, the happier she seemed. Likewise, thank you. Ida nodded with a slight bow as he accepted the bland, chipped mug that Yaoyorozu had obviously found in one of the many cupboards. Ida! Uraraka exclaimed after accepting her own tea, you're not supposed to speak until I say your name. That's how jinxes work. But you just did? Oh, damn it. You all seem so normal, Midoriya realized, sitting down on the nearest sofa and staring at his reflection in his tea. Sorry, but it's not what I expected. The three of them stared at him for a moment. Yeah, well, Uraraka began, I'm not that normal. I'm here for a reason. And I guess everyone else is too. Yaoyorozu simply nodded, and Ida just looked sad. I'm not sure why I'm here, Midoriya finally admitted. I've been thinking about it a lot, but I still don't understand. It's something to do with Kaken, right? Asked Uraraka. Midoriya flinched at the nickname. Yes. Maybe he said something about me to someone. I don't know what. But it's all I can think of at the moment. Was all Ida uttered for a minute or so. Well, I know why I'm here, Uraraka admitted, her hands on her hips after she put her mug down on the coffee table. Yaoyorozu put a coaster underneath it that seemingly appeared from nowhere as she spoke. And to be honest, it's really not that bad for me. Maybe I'll get somewhere after all this. Anyway, I might have, you see, my family's not that well off. We own a construction business. Work wasn't going well. A few machines broke and it all went wrong. I just wanted to help my family and might have resorted to some stuff my parents weren't too proud of when they found out, she explained shyly with a slight laugh. My quirk lets me float stuff, and myself. So air could get in and out of places others couldn't. You're a thief, Midoriya realized. Sorry, he added quickly, that was rude, She waved the comment off. Nah, you're totally right. Might as well admit it. I'm not proud but I did get enough money to help my parents get the business running properly again. So, there's always that. Not that they realized at the time where I'd got the money. Thought I'd found some well-paid part-time jobs. Which is technically true. It's still honorable in a way, Midoriya supposed. Yeah, thanks. But wrong, Ida added. Oh yeah, of course. What about you, Ida? And so, Ida told his story again. Midoriya didn't pay quite as much attention now that he knew the details. He focused more on the fact that, slowly but surely, other people had started to arrive. It couldn't have been long until Kakin and Todoroki returned from their detention either, right? Class A hadn't had their dinner yet, but that might have been because they were waiting until the other two came back. Midoriya wasn't sure how it worked yet. He sat back and watched as more names were added to the board. Soon, it was almost full, and Midoriya was very glad he'd had the idea. Hey, when did everyone come out of their hiding places? Called out Pink Skin Number about half an hour ago, replied Uraraka, allowing Yaoyorozu to refill her cup of tea. Ah man, I should have come down earlier. Oh, I like the board idea. Who started that? That would be Midoriya here, announced Ida whilst gesturing to him. Number 2 gave him a grin and a thumbs up, adding her name to the board. Mina Ishido. Awesome. Is this super exciting or what? Or what? Midoriya laughed nervously. Come on. This place is so cool. I've been looking forwards to coming here all year. I gotta say though, that Mr. Aizawa is intense. You were looking forwards to coming here? Scoffed number 12, Jiro. I agree, it seems rather counterintuitive, said Yaoyorozu with a hint of her earlier malice. Not for me. Ishido grinned. For someone with a super tricky, kind of deadly quirk, this is the best place for me. I don't know about you lot, but… Yeah, you clearly don't, Jiro interrupted, twiddling earphone jack-like extensions from her ears around her fingers. So, that was her quirk, huh? Ishido put her hands on her hips. What's your story then? Jiro rolled her eyes. You eavesdrop on one hero and suddenly you're a danger to society and need to be locked away or something. Midoriya narrowed his eyes. What hero? Like I'm telling you. Last time I went around doing that, I ended up here. It's best to just keep yours and everyone else's secrets to yourself. Super hearing quirk? Midoriya guessed. Jiro's eyes flickered from her earphone jacks and back to Midoriya. She pulled her hands away from them and tucked them into her hoodie, out of sight. Oh, you're quirkless 18, right? Ishido recalled, bounding over to him. It must be weird not having any quirk at all. Midoriya gave her a look. You're the one who's pink and corrosive. She blinked and then laughed. Hey, good point. Don't be rude to Midoriya, Ida swooped in. I won't hesitate to report any quirkist comments to our teacher. I'm not being rude. Must be weird not having the ability to control your quirk at all, Yaoyorozu suddenly added, sipping her tea nonchalantly. Ishido stared at her. That's why I'm here. What's your quirk then? I didn't see you use it much during the quirk assessment. Well, wouldn't you like to know? That had gone south awfully quickly. Midoriya was just surprised he'd seemed to make a few friends already, or maybe allies? People that stood up for him, whatever that meant. It hadn't really happened before. So Ida, Uraraka and Yaoyorozu seemed to tolerate him. Ishido, maybe not so much after that. Maybe not Jiro either. He didn't know about any of the others milling around. Todoroki seemed to not want to be involved at all, and Kakin definitely didn't like Midoriya. Maybe he should write all this down later. Midoriya wasn't powerful or any sort of intimidating presence. He hadn't done anything remarkable or had much of a story to tell. If he wanted to do well here, he couldn't just slip into the shadows and ignore everyone, desperate to just survive until the end. If he wanted to graduate, he had to actively prove he deserved it. His best course of action was not to gain strength nor academic prowess. He needed to be social. Mr. Aizawa had said that he and Kakin had to learn to get along if they wanted to graduate. Midoriya knew that wasn't going to happen, but if he could get everyone else, or at least a majority of them, to vouch for him, be on his side, rather than Kakin's, he had a chance. Mr. Aizawa would see that he was the victim. He wasn't a villain. He didn't belong here. How low a pH can you make your acid go, Ishido? Midoriya asked. She blinked at him, like, how strong? Yeah, what can it do? Oh, loads of stuff. It can go through plastic. I can melt like nearly anything I want. It's hard to control though. That's why I have to wear this disgusting outfit. It's so uncomfortable. She picked at the thick fabric of her long-sleeve top and baggy trousers. She wore gloves and covered as much skin as possible. It couldn't hurt to have a little more style at least. It was in that moment that they heard the front door slam open, crashing against the wall, and footsteps marched towards them. Great, moment of peace, over. Kakin came into view, and for once, Midoriya dared to not avert his gaze. He refused to be his punching bag this time. This class was full of strong, tough and stubborn individuals. Midoriya was determined to be the same. "What are you looking at, Deku?" Kakin snarled. Midoriya just sighed. He was done letting Kakin intimidate him. "What are you looking at, Kakin?" grinned Uraraka, peering over the back of the sofa. "What did you just say, round face?" "Round face," she gasped. "Don't be mean, Kakin. Call me that again and I'll kill both of you." "Told you," Midoriya shrugged. Todoroki appeared, walking harshly into Kakin's side and knocking shoulders with him. "Watch where you're going, you damn popsicle." Kakin yelled. He was not in a good mood, but was he ever? "Maybe if you brushed your hair out of your DMN eyes you could actually freaking see." But Todoroki just pushed his hair further over his eyes in retaliation. His hair was two-toned, half red and half white. But he'd pushed the white half back, so it covered up most of the red, spiking up and also covering part his face. It must have been rather long, without all that gel in it, and jaggedly cut. Midoriya could just see his famous scar, spanning the hidden half of his face. He looked very different to the missing posters and advertisements that had covered the internet over the last few years. He glanced at the board, noting his name, before turning his gaze to Midoriya, who refused to flinch. But Todoroki didn't hold it for long, before turning and wandering up the stairs to his room, out of sight. "What's the freaking board for?" Kakin suddenly snapped. "So that we all know each other's names," Ida proclaimed. It was Midoriya's idea, and a very good one, I must admit. "For sure," Uraraka beamed. "Now we don't have to call you 17 all the time, Kakin." He ground his teeth together. "Let me give you some advice, round face." He pointed an accusing finger at Midoriya, who held his gaze firm, green eyes cold and sure. "Don't freaking listen to him. The number thing was his idea, huh? Well then, I bet he's got all this copied down in a notebook somewhere. He'll find your strengths and weaknesses and turn them against you. It's all the quirkless BSTRD can do." Silence flooded the room, and Midoriya glared at Kakin. It had to have been him who got him into Class A. Perhaps he accused him of stalking or something, and maybe doing the same to heroes. It wasn't the truth, obviously, but Kakin just loved making his life difficult. It's your own fault if you decide to trust him, or any of you losers. You're all villains, but I'm going to get into Class B, and then those idiots will be sorry. And with that he shoved his hands in his pockets, turned on his heel, and thundered up the stairs. Midoriya sighed. So much for his idea of being liked for once. Who was he kidding? He'd have to try and find some other way out of Class A. But then, what's his problem? Student 13, Ciro, grinned nervously. He's kind of scary, Electric Kaminari, Student 7 winced. He's so grumpy, huffed Uraraka in agreement. Kirishima, number 8, stood up and announced, "I'm going to go and try and talk to him." "Don't be so righteous, just leave him alone," Ciro protested. "If he doesn't make an effort with us, why should we make an effort with him?" "I vote we just ignore him for a week," Jiro grinned. "Maybe he'll calm down after that." Kirishima simply shrugged and went after Kakin anyway. But Midoriya was stunned. He'd never seen anyone else stand up to Kakin like that. And after everything he'd just said about him. "I don't get it," he laughed nervously. "Ain't she just?" "He might have been the big bad at your old school," Uraraka interjected, "but I don't think it works like that here. He did really well in the quirk test, but I don't think any of us are going to gang up with him just because he's strong. Plus, Ida did better." "It's not right to judge any of us by the means in which we arrived here," said Ida, standing up to collect empty cups. "It would be hypocritical. I'm not sure what to make of what Bakugo said about you, Midoriya, but unlike him, you made an effort. I respect you for that." "Thanks. So, you're like, super smart, yeah?" Ashido grinned, leaning over the sofa towards him. Midoriya inched away. "I don't. You analyze stuff? Isn't that what the mean guy said about strengths and weaknesses or something?" she guessed. "Well, yes, but I. What about me? Can you analyze me, can you help me with my quirk? I might need a little more time, Midoriya admitted, standing up. He hesitated and gazed around at his classmates. Are you seriously not bothered by what Keikaken just said? We're in Class A, dude, Jiro reminded him, flopping into the place he just left on the sofa. Who cares? I always speak my mind, spoke up Croaky number 3, Azui, as she hopped towards him. And I would like to point out that out of you and Bakugo, you are far more tolerable, Ribbit. Thank you. Midoriya replied unsurely. What he said just makes me want you to not hate me, like you hate him. I don't hate, he wavered. Okay, yeah, maybe I do, just a little. A lot, Ribbit. But why would I hate you? We're in Class A, she reminded him, holding a finger to her chin in a thoughtful manner. Anything's possible. Like you being here. Uraraka interjected, grinning at Azui. You seem so nice. It's a long story. Well, we're happy to hear whenever you're happy to tell it. Thank you. Maybe another time, Ribbit. Sure. Wanna sit? There's space. Midoriya was still struggling to believe what had just happened. Out of all the places he expected to find blind acceptance, and he found it in a class full of villains. If this is what it means to be a villain, then why did he ever want to be a hero? Midoriya struggled to sleep on the first night of UA. The light pouring under his door from the hallway made it hard to keep his eyes shut, but if he turned it off, he risked the wrath of Student 14's shadow monster quirk. Just thinking about it in the middle of the night only made things worse. The unfamiliarity of his room made him uncomfortable, but not as much as the tracker anklet did. They all had to wear one at all times, and they couldn't take it off. It was waterproof and surprisingly thin, so unnoticeable under clothing. But the feeling of it against his skin, however slight it was, still made him itch and fidget. He'd also noticed that different people had slightly altered designs. Todoroki's and Kaken's were thicker and of a different material, perhaps fireproofing so they couldn't melt it off. The same must have applied to Ashido, but she wore clothing that covered as much of her skin as possible, meaning the anklet was hidden from sight. Kaminari's was different again, maybe to stop him from short-circuiting it. Of course, Midoriya had already tried prizing his off, but it wouldn't budge. The anklet had more purpose than just keeping an eye on their whereabouts. Whilst most students needed a student ID to get through the gates to UA without the defenses being activated and barricades appearing from seemingly nowhere to stop intruders, the anklets did the exact opposite. They activated the barricades if they tried to leave. Moreover, with the principal being able to see their exact positions at all times on a digital map of the school, Midoriya felt even more uncomfortable. But he must have slept eventually, or else he couldn't have been awoken by the shrill sound of the alarm clock that he hadn't set himself. The wake-up call was so ear-piercing that he almost fell out of bed. It didn't help that he could just hear everyone else's alarms go off at exactly the same time, despite the thick walls, and a chorus of groggy mms and complaints filled the dorm. Wanting to get to the bathrooms first as to avoid as many awkward interactions as possible, Midoriya got into his uniform in a hurry and practically ran downstairs to brush his teeth and wash up. Not shower though, he'd do that in the evenings again, to avoid awkward morning interactions. Last night, they'd been supplied dinner by Lunch Rush, a hero who doubled as a brilliant cook. But Mr. Aizawa was quick to inform them that from now on, they'd have to cook dinner themselves. Breakfast was for individuals to organize, and lunch was free for them. Uraraka was the most ecstatic about that idea, specifically by the word free. Whilst everyone else slowly but surely set about their new morning routine, Midoriya was well ahead of the game. He'd scoffed breakfast before most of his classmates even appeared to go to the bathrooms, but he made sure to wait until he'd definitely seen Kaken turn up before risking going up the stairs. He didn't want to pass him because that gambled a quick trip back down the stairs and another visit to Recovery Girl. After the danger had passed, he returned to his room to gather what he thought he might need for the day. In his yellow backpack, artfully decorated with hand-shaped scorch marks, he shoved his slightly tattered PE kit, his pencil case and 2 of his notebooks, one empty, and one partially filled with information on the rest of Class 1A. He'd simply titled it A in a massive, bold letter that smothered the entirety of the front cover in splodgy red ink. He'd only had a day, so the information was still rather lacking. He took it back downstairs, and was able to finally add everyone's names, since a few were still missing last night, and he couldn't quite remember how to spell all of them. In fact, the only name that wasn't on the board by the morning was Kakin's, since he'd clearly rubbed it off in spite. But Midoriya watched as Uraraka wrote in its place Kakin, in the tackiest writing possible. He'd had to correct her spelling of the name, which gave her fits of giggles. She sat down next to him whilst she ate her toast. Midoriya had to angle his arm to make sure she couldn't see what he was writing and drawing. Having her sitting next to him was the perfect opportunity to add a sketch. He used to do that all the time with heroes. His villainous classmates were no different. With all the practice, he'd gotten quite good at drawing. But he'd learnt the hard way to keep his notes private. Kakin burnt them all up whenever he caught a glimpse. Speaking of which, he was practically smoldering in anger when he wiped Uraraka's writing off the board. At 8:20 a.m. exactly, Mr. Aizawa unlocked the doors to the dorm to escort them all up to the classroom. Midoriya had thought he'd let them all make their own way to class, since that was what happened on day one. Perhaps Todoroki's incident yesterday, when he decided not to leave the changing rooms, had convinced Mr. Aizawa to take extra precautions. Midoriya was sure that later in the year, their teacher would just unlock the doors and meet them at their classroom later on. "We will be starting ordinary lessons today," their drab homeroom teacher explained. "Some of your teachers may give you short tests to assess your abilities in each subject. We don't expect you all to be of a similar level, given your different backgrounds. Once they know what you know, they'll be able to alter the course to better benefit you all. So, actually try in these tests. It'll make it easier for everyone in the long run. Don't make me give out more detentions on the second day." To everyone's surprise, including Mr. Aizawa's, someone then actually raised their hand. "Yes, 7. If I'm just so bad at everything that it doesn't look like I'm trying, will I still get detention?" Kaminari asked with a sly grin. A few others around the classroom suppressed their laughter. But Midoriya was more interested in what their teacher would. "I'll be the judge of that," he snapped, and the class fell silent once more. Mr. Aizawa had the uncanny ability to keep even the rowdiest group under his complete control. Midoriya didn't know quite what it was about him, but no one dared put a foot wrong in his presence. He didn't exactly look like the sharpest, strictest person in the world, but something about his very existence, and his piercing glare, made even the toughest student cower in their place. However, not all of the teachers of UA had the same intensity. "Welcome to Class 1, little listeners." Yaiwa. Midoriya grimaced and covered his ears. He wasn't the only one. Even Mr. Aizawa was quick to try and make his leave when their new English teacher, the overly energetic hero, Present Mike, burst into the room. "Any instructions, Aizawa?" "Just don't try them," he sighed, and slipped out the door, dragging his sleeping bag along behind him. "You got it," Present Mike exclaimed, giving his colleague a thumbs up as he disappeared. "Now, who's ready for some? Hey, could you tone it down a little?" Everyone stared at Midoriya. He swallowed, "Some of us have sensitive ears," and he gestured to Jiro, sitting not that far in front of him. "You got it, little listener." Present Mike grinned, now only at a slightly above average volume. Midoriya didn't fail to notice the shocked look upon Jiro's face, and the soft smile that she developed soon after, whilst Present Mike was handing out empty exercise books. Midoriya smiled too. That's one more person who didn't hate him. Mr. Aizawa had been right about the pop quizzes. English wasn't Midoriya's strongest subject, but that wasn't the end of the world. By the looks on some of his classmates' faces, he wasn't struggling nearly as much as they were when faced with all the grammar and vocabulary Present Mike threw at them. When they'd finished, Ida volunteered to collect the exercise books back in. Present Mike sat back and watched whilst Ida wandered around the classroom like any other normal person would do to collect the books. But apparently, this was not normal behavior for Class 1A. It's been a while since Class A was so civil towards each other so early. Present Mike almost laughed. And in such a strange group too. "Why are we strange?" Azui asked immediately, doing that thing where she prodded her chin with her finger. It seemed to be a habit. "Lot more vigilantes than usual. And some cool quirks, or lack of." Midoriya narrowed his eyes at him. trying to ignore the glances in his direction. You know, you're the first person without a quirk to ever attend UA 18. Present Mike announced. Great, so they'd been talking about him in the staff room. Well, it was to be expected. The staff had likely had a lengthy conversation about every member of Class A. Perhaps Mr. Aizawa had instructed them all to call them by numbers during the meeting as well. It had to be some sort of twisted teaching method. Then why am I here? Midoriya dared to ask. The class fell silent like it did only in the presence of Mr. Aizawa. Midoriya wondered how many others had quietly asked the same question about him to themselves. Kaken scoffed but didn't say anything. Midoriya glared daggers at the back of his head. What's so funny? You know exactly why you're here, Deku, he hissed. Midoriya wasn't going to cower down in front of Kaken anymore. He'd said it before, but he'd say it again, even if only to convince himself, but he'd had enough. In a class full of villains, he refused to be so weak. If I knew, I wouldn't ask. You think you're so freaking smart, but you're actually as much of an idiot as the rest of them, Kaken snarled back. This classroom doesn't work that way, Kaken. You can't intimidate people into liking you. Has anyone ever told you that your personality reeks like if someone set the sewers on fire? Kaminari butted in. What did you just say? Kaken yelled, standing up and pushing his chair back so that it hit the front of Midoriya's desk in the process. Well, we only just met you, so it's quite telling, Ribbit, added Azui. I'll kill all of you. Hey, settle down, started Present Mike. Uraraka took the opportunity. Yeah, calm down, Kaken. You might want to take back that comment about us being civilized, sir, Siro laughed. Kaken slammed his hands onto Midoriya's desk, letting smoke hiss out from underneath them. This is all your fault. And we're back to berating Midoriya again. Leave him alone, man, said Jiro. What did he ever do wrong? Look at his freaking stalker notebooks and think again, he shouted, grabbing Midoriya's bag before he even realized what was happening. Hey, give that back. Midoriya stood up and lunged forwards, but Kaken had already retrieved the notebook marked A, and Midoriya regretted labeling it so soon. Just try and take it from me. But Present Mike now had his hand on Kaken's shoulder, and a disappointed look upon his face. Come on, little listener, give the notebook back. I don't want to have to give out detentions. I'm the cool teacher. Kaken gritted his teeth and chucked the notebook at Midoriya's feet. Now it matched every other notebook he'd ever used. There was a nice set of burnt fingerprints on the cover. They sat back down, and Ida finally handed Present Mike the pile of numbered exercise books. Ida gave Midoriya a sympathetic glance before making his way back to his own desk. So, what was the notebook? Midoriya gulped at Present Mike's question as he slid the item back into his bag. He was going to have to admit that Kaken was right, and all the good relationships he'd forged would be void. It's one of your analysis books, right? Pink-skinned Ashido perked up with a smile. Midoriya blinked at her in surprise. Her smile grew wider. He does quirk analysis, sir, she explained. He's going to help me with mine. I never, he hesitated. Last night, Kaken had ranted about his notebooks again. Ashido picked up on it and asked if he could analyze her quirk to help her out. It must have meant a lot to her. He thought Ashido wasn't that fond of him, but this might help amend that. Yeah, eventually. She beamed. I used to analyze heroes and stuff a lot, Midoriya admitted, absent-mindedly brushing away the scorch marks on his desk. It was a hobby, I guess. Did you ever write about me? Present Mike asked, pointing a thumb at himself and grinning. Midoriya had, although it was a while ago. If he were still much of a hero fan, he would have freaked out about having him as his English teacher. He used to listen to his radio show all the time. In fact, he was still secretly excited about meeting all these heroes, even though he'd tried to hide it. He just hadn't figured out who Mr. Aizawa was yet. Yeah, I think so, Midoriya shrugged. Come on, what about my strengths and weaknesses? I would say do it in English, but that's harsh. So think of this as a little public speaking exercise. Midoriya wasn't quite sure what to do. People usually weren't that interested in what he had to say, especially in terms of this kind of stuff. He started mumbling about his quirk and all his strengths, fiddling with his thumbs and never really meeting anyone's eyes. Kakin seemed to be stewing in his anger in silence, which was the only thing which encouraged Midoriya to keep going. "Hey, you know your stuff, little listener," Present Mike exclaimed. "I'm impressed." Midoriya smiled. People hardly ever complimented him about all this. They usually found it creepy. "Oh, what about his weaknesses?" asked Invisible Hagakure. "Yeah. Come on, how do we take him down?" laughed Ishido. Present Mike waved it off. "The best heroes keep their weaknesses a secret. There's no way he knows about?" Midoriya smiled and deadpanned, "Insects." And most of the class turned to the hero with identical, toothy grins, as a single bead of sweat fell from his forehead. The bell sounded. "And that's the end of your first lesson," Present Mike barked, still looking rather worried for his general well-being. "You have maths in 10 minutes, so have fun." "Are you scared of bugs?" asked Jiro. "Signing off now, bye-bye." And he slammed the door shut behind him. A couple of seconds passed before the class burst into laughter. By the time their maths teacher, Mr. Ectoplasm, arrived, Kaminari and Ishido had already cooked up half a dozen pranks for poor Present Mike, and Midoriya was smiling so much that it hurt. A tough morning of surprise exams passed them by, and soon enough, Class 1A was off down to lunch. Midoriya found it kind of funny, watching how different friendship groups were already being forged. With the whole pranking Present Mike idea, Kaminari and Ishido had gotten talking. Kaminari had dragged along Siro, and Ishido had roped in Kirishima, who appeared to already know her from outside UA. Kirishima seemed to be a genuinely nice person. He was the only one who made much of an effort with Kakin, despite the fact that he was still calling him weird hair. And so, Kirishima dragged Kakin along to this group of energetic pranksters, who were still animatedly calling him names, and he was doing so in return. It was strangely nice to see. Midoriya found himself spending more time with Ida and Uraraka, since they were the first to actually talk to him. But now Yaoyorozu and Aju, "Please call me Tsu," were tagging along as well. Midoriya couldn't remember a time when he'd found himself in a group of people who seemed to actually like him. Friends? They were friends, right? It had been a while since he'd actually had friends, if ever. He'd come to learn that Kakin didn't count, and he never had. "A lot of Quirkus people out there," Ribbit, Ajui, Tsu, croaked. "My brother had a problem with some of his classmates. They'd make fun of him. I stepped in when they started leaving dead frogs in his locker." "Oh, that's horrible," Uraraka gasped. "It was," she agreed. "I went to the head teacher and he gave the bullies some stern words, but it didn't help," Ribbit. "They got angry that he told someone about it all. He started coming home covered in bruises, so I followed him around until I caught them in the act and confronted them," Ribbit. "They attacked, so I defended, but no one believed me. I think one of the boys' family gave quite a few generous donations to the school in the past, so when they reported me, the school backed him up and I was punished for it." Yaoyorozu frowned. "And you ended up here just because of that?" "Not exactly, Ribbit. It kept happening and I kept stepping in. One day I think hurt someone. Or maybe they made it up. The school had to act somehow, but they didn't want me locked up as a villain, so it was filed as vigilantism. The head teacher forwarded the case to UA, and they accepted me. It's not the best outcome, but I suppose it could have been worse." "Agreed. And the boys faced some consequences too. 2 of them were expelled. But I can't protect my brother anymore or contact him. I hope he's okay, Ribbit." "You did a very honorable thing, Ajui," Ida nodded in respect. "I've told you to call me Tsu." Uraraka groaned loudly as they joined the lunch queue. "You guys are all so cool. And I'm here for something way less cool." "You haven't heard my story yet," Yaoyorozu sighed. "I suppose I'll have to explain in due course?" "Only when you want to," Ida insisted. "Thank you." Midoriya had remained silent throughout, listening, but also casting an eye towards a few people a little further up the queue. They kept giving them sideways glances. It wasn't hard to notice the red bands or the large numbers on their blazers. They were clearly Class 1A. So, who were they? Todoroki was just ahead of them, standing alone. He was a hostile and abrasive individual, in a vastly different way to Kakin. Midoriya hadn't quite figured him out yet. But right now, he was looking at the same group of people that Midoriya was, and there was a look of disgust in his eyes which seemed to indicate that he knew them. A blond boy with dull eyes and a cocky smile turned his head. Todoroki immediately averted his gaze, but the damage was done. "Well, hello there, number 15, the other boy said with a laugh. "Are you planning on washing up after us again tonight? Or will UA just lock you up with the other villains until morning?" "Class 1B, Midoriya muttered, and the other four immediately locked gaze with the opposing class. It was the first time they'd met, but Todoroki and Kaken both received detention last night and were tasked on washing up after Class B's dinner. Todoroki didn't say a word, trying to ignore him completely. "Oh, come on," the boy grinned. "I'm just trying to strike up a conversation. You could have been in our class once upon a time. I'm just extending the hospitality of UA. You should be glad they let you within a mile of this place." "How rude," Ida spoke up, but none of them were brave enough to step in. Perhaps Tsu's story about the fallbacks of standing up for people had struck a chord. "You have an incredible power, being the son of the number 2 hero," he leered, stepping closer to Todoroki and reaching out to him. "It's such a shame to see it go to waste." Todoroki slapped his hand away. "Back off," he snarled. The hero student pursed his lips for a moment, before glancing down at the hand Todoroki had knocked away. He clicked his fingers and a flame began to burn. "So, you can use fire, interesting. In all the encounters shown on the news, you'd only ever used ice. Why hide a part of who you are?" He let the fire grow brighter, catching the eyes of a few other students around them, so it wouldn't have been strange for Midoriya to continue watching carefully. The hero student held out his other hand and let ice crystals form over it, half ice, half fire. "You would have been the perfect—" "Stop it," Todoroki interrupted, leaning in closer. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know quirks," he sighed, "not people. But it is a shame, I know your quirk better than you do." A copy quirk, Midoriya realized. It was an incredible power. Midoriya would have done anything to have something like that, but it was not to be. That didn't mean he was powerless though. No, not against a copy quirk. Midoriya made his move, stepping forwards to Todoroki's side. "If you plan on being a hero, you should first figure out how to be a good person," he snapped. He narrowed his eyes. "And who might you be?" "Another villain." "Who are you?" He tilted his head to try and catch a glimpse of the number on Midoriya's back. 18, I see. "I'm Minoma, Class 1B. "I figured," Midoriya replied. "Can you please leave us alone? We didn't do anything wrong." "On the contrary," the boy, Minoma, laughed. "Why do you think you're here?" It was a question Midoriya had been asking himself a lot, but he decided to take a leaf out of Yaoyorozu's book in this situation. "Wouldn't you like to know?" he hissed. He simply laughed again. "Oh, I can always find out. I always find a way." He stepped a little closer to Midoriya, holding an icy hand over his heart. "I am a hero, and you are a villain. Which side do you think the school is really on?" Midoriya saw Todoroki flinch as Minoma rested his hand on Midoriya's shoulder. He must have come to the same conclusion Midoriya had. The quirk was activated through touch. The ice cracked away and left a chill behind. "Is that a threat?" Yaoyorozu spoke up. Midoriya hated Minoma's laugh. "You villains are always quick to start a fight. We're just having a civilized conversation here." He turned back to Midoriya, pulling his hand away. "Now, what about you? I suppose I didn't make my query clear. Why you here? What is your power?" He looked down at his hands and stared for a moment, and then frowned. Midoriya let a smile creep across his face whilst Minoma grew increasingly confused. His eyes darted from Midoriya and back to his hand. After a few seconds, he turned around and grabbed his ginger-haired friend by the arm, who hadn't been paying attention to the interaction at all. Midoriya guessed that he was trying to copy her quirk, already being familiar with it. "Minoma, what are you doing?" she questioned, her hands on her hips after she pulled away from him. Minoma just looked back to his hands, breath now frantic. "What did you do?" he asked Midoriya. Realizing his assumption had been correct, Midoriya began his charade. "A copy quirk, right? You make contact with someone and you copy their power. That is bound to have some limitations. Is it one power at a time?" Or as many as you want, with a time limit on each? Can you combine quirks? Or do you have to switch one off and another on? He questioned thoughtfully, genuinely interested. What did you do? He repeated, seemingly rather frightened. Now, Midoriya could have just explained that he'd copied his quirk, which, of course, was nothing. But he had a better idea. Well, our abilities seem to fundamentally contradict one another, Midoriya sighed. He turned and started to pace back and forth. Can you at least answer my question? Is there a time limit? Hey, what just happened? Frowned the ginger girl with the ponytail, clearly ready to step in if something was going wrong. They'd gathered quite an audience too. He did something to my quirk. Monoma accused, his calm composure lost to the wind. Well, it's your own fault, Midoriya shrugged. He walked around behind Todoroki and whispered hastily to him, freeze my arm quickly. Todoroki seemed unsure, but thankfully, didn't question it. He brushed his hand against Midoriya, and with a sudden chill, Midoriya's hand was as frozen as Monoma's had been, ice crystals quickly melting against warm skin and trickling down his palm. Monoma, sir, it is a cool quirk, both of yours are. That's my quirk, Monoma gaped with wide eyes. You took my quirk. Give it back. Tell me how long your time limit is, Midoriya insisted, brushing away the ice. And I'll think about it. Monoma gritted his teeth. 5 minutes per quirk. Cool, and can you combine them? No, now give it back to me. He reached forwards as though to snatch something out of the air. Midoriya just gave him a look. It doesn't work like that. You won't need contact when you get it back. It just needs to be released. You'll have it in 5 minutes. Hey, give it back, the ginger girl ordered. It's not funny you're frightening him. And it's not funny to have a go at us either. We didn't choose to be here, at least, most of us didn't. Stop having a go at us for being in your school, and we'll stop getting in your way, deal? Fine, Monoma exclaimed, just give me my quirk back. He said 5 minutes, Todoroki breathed. He must have caught on to Midoriya's trick. Keep asking and it'll be 10. He snapped his mouth shut, and silence fell over them all. You want to eat lunch with us, Todoroki? Midoriya asked whilst everyone continued to stare. He hesitated and then shrugged. Sure, but don't call me that. Oh, okay, but I can't just call you 15. Shoto is fine. Okay. The crowd parted as the group of villains rejoined the lunch queue. In fact, there wasn't a queue, they let them go right to the front. Uraraka just hummed along to a tune in her head and followed suit, not bothered at all by the situation. The only one who seemed at all worried was Ida, who didn't speak up about it for a while. That was very brave, Ribbit, Sue voiced when they finally sat down, somewhere far away from everyone else. Midoriya sighed in relief. It was kind of scary. You were kind of scary, Uraraka exclaimed. But also really cool, that was smart. It was, Yaoyorozu nodded. I don't think I would have thought of it. I don't get it though, you are quirkless, right? Said Uraraka, picking at her food. Why I am, Midoriya answered, rubbing his head shyly. But I realized he had a copy quirk and, well, if he tried to copy quirklessness, I thought that maybe he'd copy having nothing, which would mean he couldn't turn his quirk on or off or do anything until his timer ran out. There had to be a timer, it made the most sense. I was a little worried there wasn't for a moment. So, that's why he thought you took his quirk. Uraraka gasped. Wasn't there an old villain with a power like that or something? Whatever. Now he thinks your quirk is stealing others. Because he didn't anticipate someone in this school being quirkless, Yaoyorozu finished. Todoroki didn't say a thing. He simply sat there and noisily slurped his noodles. Midoriya figured he wasn't the type for much social interaction, which he could relate to. I don't think antagonizing the hero class was a wise idea. Ida finally spoke up. They are our betters and we shouldn't. They aren't our betters, Midoriya quickly interrupted. Don't talk yourself down like that, Ida. You'll transfer soon enough. That's why you're here, right? He hesitated, before clearing his throat and continuing, this may come back to haunt you. Midoriya simply shrugged. Why do you think I'm here? And they all fell silent again, filled only by the sound of Todoroki eating. Midoriya stared at his rice, thinking over what he just said. Why do you think I'm here? I've had a complaint from Class 1B today, Mr. Aizawa announced at the end of the day, and Midoriya shrunk into his seat. About one of their most promising students having their quirk taken away from them and being threatened by U-18. Midoriya felt all their eyes on the back of his head. Care to explain? Mr. Aizawa asked, raising his eyebrows. May have faked taking his quirk, he admitted sheepishly. He has a copy ability and he copied my quirklessness, so I thought that maybe I could trick him, but I didn't mean to scare him so much. I just... Calm down, the teacher sighed, rubbing his temples. I can't process if you're speaking that fast. It's not his fault, Todoroki. No, Shoto suddenly interjected. Everyone stared at him. No one could have expected him to speak up. He glanced around the room, suddenly seeming a lot less cold and unforgiving, and a little more human. Monoma was antagonizing me, and Midoriya stepped in. Mr. Aizawa let a long, hard moment of silence hold the atmosphere in an iron grip. 18, he began. At his name, Midoriya flinched and cowered. Mr. Aizawa continued, you need to understand that fabricated strengths can quickly become very real weaknesses. The tension left Midoriya's shoulders, and he sat up a little straighter, confused. Class B will target you because of this, his teacher explained. You will all be attending several classes together, and Monoma won't forget what you did. He'll catch on eventually. Midoriya gulped. Yes, sir. Sorry. Sir. You also need to realize that the lack of a quirk isn't a weakness. You all need to understand that. Mr. Aizawa gazed around the classroom. Midoriya stared back at him with wide eyes. Quirklessness isn't a weakness, he repeated. It is just the lack of a strength. You have plenty of other strengths, Midoriya. You don't need to cover up and hide. If you step back and really look at it, you can find power in what you think is powerlessness. He just used his name. But if you do something like this again, it's detention in Class B's dorm. Get it, problem child? Why, sir. Sorry again. Good. When the day came to a close, and Midoriya once again rested his head against his pillow, he realized he was still smiling. Midoriya slept well on the second night of UA. 2 weeks prior to the first term of UA. Hello, Mr. Aizawa. It's good to see you again. Principal Nizu beamed. Aizawa knew better than to refuse. He gave him a swift nod, and a cup was pushed towards him. The small, intelligent rat bear thing clambered down off his desk. He'd been standing on it to pour the tea. Now back in his chair, and Aizawa seated opposite him, they were ready to begin. This time of year is always dreadfully exciting, don't you agree? In some ways, Aizawa answered hesitantly. After your success in Class A last year, I would expect you to be looking forwards to this one. I can't know until I meet them. Of course not, but this is the first step. Aizawa had been the leading role in UA's redemption class, commonly known as the A-class threat, for quite a few years now. Long ago, he would have never guessed he'd end up leading this class, but the cause was very meaningful to him, especially. He'd seen very few failures, and most of his students had gone on to live fulfilling lives on the right side of the law. But he could never expect every year to be as simple as the last. Despite every student graduating before summer's end last time, Aizawa could not afford to rest easy. Some of those students, too, had been particularly challenging. If they hadn't ended up at UA, who knows what horrors they could have found themselves a part of. But whilst Aizawa was busy trying to turn these kids' lives around, Principal Nizu was already setting his sights on the next lot. And that's what they were here to do. Nizu had already finalized the students, organized the dorms, and informed the families. But this was the first time Aizawa would see them all, at least in their files. The meeting was the same every year. A couple of weeks before term began, Nizu called the hero to his office so they could go through the files together. There was a couple of students this year that Aizawa had known he'd be seeing for a while. The game was about to begin. We have a very interesting group this year, Nizu grinned. He spread the 20 files out in front of him in number order. What shall we start with? Aizawa wavered. Let's go with the dangerous quirks. Nizu nodded. Number 1. He reached towards the file. Yuga Aoyama, a laser power without control? I can see why he's here. He has a specialized belt for refining his power and limiting outbursts. Belt? It's a naval laser. Right. Number 2. Aizawa closed the first file and reached for the second. They went through each and every student like this, assessing their dangers and the precautions taken. They had fewer dangerous quirks than normal, but more vigilantes. The villains only made up half the class. Shoto Todoroki, Aizawa sighed. He knew he'd be seeing him here. I've been looking forward to having Endeavor's son in our halls. Nizu beamed. And for him to be in Class 1A? No one could have predicted it, not even me. He'll be tricky, Aizawa warned, staring at the photo in his files. The boy had styled his dual-colored hair to hide his scar, and cover most of the red with white. There's a story here we don't know completely, and we're no closer to locating Dabi. Has Endeavor said anything? He insists Dabi corrupted the child, Nizu admitted, resting his paws on top of one another, although I agree. The boy disappeared without a trace, with no sign of a fight. He has been trained by his father from a young age to take up his mantle, yet he didn't fight his kidnapper. Yes, there will be a lot of work ahead of you. His quirk is listed as ice and fire, Aizawa realized. He scanned over the pictures taken when he was fleeing the police and heroes. He only ever used ice. He's repressing half his abilities. Specifically, fire, an ability held by both Dabi and Endeavor. The two met eyes for a moment. Aizawa didn't like this case one bit, and he knew Nizu didn't either. The way to him will be through the others, Aizawa insisted. I'm a hero, a teacher, and an adult. There's no way he'll let me close to him. But if he lets one of the other students get close, he might lower his defenses, and we can get to the bottom of this. He closed the file and pushed it back into place. Perhaps number 4 would be of assistance. Aizawa knew who this would be as well. He opened the file, and the face of Tenya Ida stared back at him. This kid had so much potential, Aizawa sighed. He still does, Nizu reminded him. He has learnt a valuable lesson. His elder brother clearly means a lot to him, and Tensei's paralysis by the hands of the hero killer, Stain, must have destroyed young Tenya. You think he could help us get close to Todoroki? Well, what do you think? Nizu asked, sipping his tea. Aizawa closed the file. No, they're too different. I know Tenya through Tensei. Tenya is usually rigid and almost robotic in personality. He won't click with Todoroki, even if they come from similar backgrounds. And Ida respects heroes greatly. Todoroki doesn't. Nizu nodded. I had similar thoughts. I simply wanted your opinion. Well, Todoroki will definitely be the biggest challenge this year. But then Nizu smiled, and Aizawa knew he was in for a whole load of trouble. Actually, there are 2 more we haven't had the chance to speak about yet. Aizawa's eyes flickered to the 2 files he'd yet to touch, sitting right in front of him. 17 and Open 17 first. Aizawa narrowed his eyes as he did as he was told. Number 18 awaited him, the bold number plaguing the corner of his sight as he tried to focus on, I know this kid. Aizawa realized, Katsuki Bakugo, he was on the news about a year ago. Bakugo had great heroic potential, Nizu explained. He has an immensely powerful quirk that he has competent control over. 10 months ago, he was caught by a villain made of sludge, who tried to suffocate him. Bakugo panicked and started several fires. The heroes at the incident were not suited for the job, and all reports suggest that Bakugo would have died if All Might hadn't arrived just in time. But that wasn't all, was it? He frowned, trying to remember. There was another kid. Yes, his classmate. He stepped in when he saw Bakugo in trouble. The heroes insist that he got in the way and could have made the situation worse, but I have looked through the footage. He bought them a few vital seconds. Bakugo would have died if he hadn't run in to save him. Aizawa was getting more curious about 18 now. But that's not the only reason he was on the news. Nizu's smile grew wider. A classmate of his gathered significant evidence to prove that Bakugo was a quirkist bully. His victims suffered from frequent physical and emotional abuse, and the school did nothing to stop it. Bakugo was blacklisted from any hero school, and the school itself suffered greatly. But you believe Bakugo still deserves a chance? Aizawa raised his eyebrows. That's up to you. Aizawa grunted, of course it was. He put down the file, and finally reached out to number. After a glance in Nizu's direction, he opened it, and saw an eerily familiar face. Glancing at Nizu again, Aizawa threw file 17 back open. But, this is the kid who saved Bakugo, Aizawa realized. This is number 18? Izuku Midoriya, Nizu positively beamed. He is also the student that Bakugo bullied. Aizawa furrowed his brow. He just noticed some interesting information in 18's file. Quirkless. I know, isn't it wonderful? Aizawa blinked at him. Why is this kid here? What did he do? Nizu reached forward for file 18, still smiling menacingly. Oh, poor Midoriya. He must have suffered much torment from Bakugo and many others for his quirklessness. He didn't fare well after the sludge villain attack either. This was before he'd complied his evidence against Bakugo, of course. Yet he still saved him. Threw a notebook at the villain's eye with astonishing aim, I must admit. It wasn't vigilantism, he didn't use a quirk, obviously. And he still wasn't punished when afterwards he publicly shamed every hero present for not taking action like he had, for not trying everything they could. They were prepared to let Bakugo die, and Midoriya was furious. You should see the video. It's been taken down in numerous locations, but you can find it if you look hard enough. The boy wasn't even fond of All Might, despite him saving his life. So, the kid hates heroes, Aizawa assumed. Why should he be in my class? Well, he did also hack into his school's security system to gather evidence against Bakugo. Broke in at night to achieve it. His only crime is breaking and entering. Nizu laughed, he wasn't caught. No, he is much too clever for that. Then why is he here? Nizu paused, smile fading. Eraserhead, you have seen hundreds of students pass through these halls. Heroes, villains, and everything in between. But this small, quirkless boy, this is the most dangerous member of Class 1A you have ever seen. Aizawa looked him dead in the eyes. Why? The smile returned, that Demed smile. Look at the world we live in, of heroes and villains. We the heroes stand as the leader of the pack. The villains are but a small percentage that we mercilessly try to stamp out of existence, but we will never succeed. That is but the way of life. Look at all these, once innocent children. They fell through the cracks, it is not their fault. We're here to pull them back up again. But we can only help so many. The rest will fester in the darkness, and the best, or perhaps worst, of them will rise up to attack our light. They only go so far, of course. They never learn to band together. The great powers face titans such as All Might, and the world rejoices in the villain's defeat. Now, imagine in a few years' time, a young man, who has been towing the line of the dark his whole life, slips over the edge. He has no power of his own, but great motivation and determination. He sees power in what once was powerlessness, and this wonderful, brilliant mind stands up and speaks to the rest who we have failed. Imagine a leader who can tell the villains that they are not alone, that they are not powerless. He knows how they feel. He knows what it's like to be where they are. Imagine a leader, and take another look at that boy. Aizawa looked back down at the face of Izuku Midoriya. The photo was taken recently. There was such anger in his emerald green eyes. And suddenly he could see it, too, the potential. He wouldn't go down in a battle of raw strength, where a hero would appear victorious and as legendary as the warriors of old, said Nizu. If he so willed, I believe he could wage a battle of wits, unlike any of us have ever seen. All he needs to do is slip. Nizu was never wrong. Never. Oh, and another thing. After some accidental circumstances, moments before the sludge villain attack, our number 18 discovered All Might's power limit. Aizawa's eyes grew wide. That oaf, how did he let his secret out to a teenager? It was an accident, as I said, but it does raise some problems, considering everything else I have said. After all, young Midoriya just needs a group to lead. Nizu smiled, and he returned his file to its place among the rest of Class A. And imagine what he could become. Yes, this year would be interesting indeed. 1 week into UA's first term, Midoriya had started adding his teachers to Notebook A. There was plenty of space, it might as well be filled. Speaking of which, his notebook kept disappearing for short periods of time and mysteriously reappearing with extra notes added to the occasional page. It didn't take him long to realize that it was Uraraka's doing. It was such a shame he was banned from the internet. None of Class A were permitted to have contact with the outside world. Midoriya supposed individuals who had found themselves in more dangerous groups would be best completely isolated from that situation, and the rest of Class A would have to be treated in the same way. Midoriya also had the sneaking suspicion that the staff were well aware of his more technological skills. But if he did have access to the internet, he might have been able to find some more information on Mr. Aizawa. He'd yet to figure out his quirk, but the man was still somewhat familiar. He had to be an underground hero, especially with the getup he wore around school. All the other teachers wore their hero costumes at all times, and Mr. Aizawa couldn't have been any different. If he was overground like the rest of them, it was bound to be a little more flashy, designed to grab attention. Midoriya did feel as though it was acceptable that he couldn't remember who Mr. Aizawa was in this case. It just proved that he was a good underground hero. And he was a good teacher too. Midoriya had finally figured out what the numbers were all about. It definitely was a teaching method. And it worked. Addressing everyone as numbers initially dehumanizes them, making them feel regretful for being there, feeling like they were in a prison, like they'd done wrong and that they didn't deserve to be called by their names. Which was rather horrible. But as soon as they started doing better, Mr. Aizawa would miraculously remember what they were really called. Midoriya wasn't the only one who lit up at the sound of his real name. He felt like he was a puppy in training, but he couldn't help it. UA was a school unlike any other, and Midoriya was actually starting to enjoy being there. The only distractions and lessons occurred when the rest of the class decided they were bored of the teacher. On several occasions, all of which were present mic, they'd managed to actually chase them out of the room screaming very loudly. Maybe Midoriya wasn't learning as much as he perhaps would have been, and not having the internet didn't help, but at least his stuff wasn't being burnt up and he wasn't hobbling home trying to hide his fresh injuries every day. Maybe the rest of the school avoided them like they had the plague, always pointing and whispering, but Midoriya was used to that from his old school. At least it wasn't only him. Also, one glance from Shoto and most went running, so that was fun. Maybe he was labeled as a villain. Maybe the outside world was watching and waiting for the sports festival, an eventuality which loomed over them like a death sentence. It would be the first time their families saw them since the start of school. Maybe Midoriya missed home, maybe he was ashamed. Maybe UA still wasn't all that great. But he tried to forget about all that and focus on the best thing that had happened to him so far. He actually had friends. And they were the coolest people he had ever met. Uraraka had a frighteningly good knowledge of martial arts that most likely came from an equally frightening source, so everyone decided to steer well clear of the topic. Student number 6, Ojiro, however, was extremely interested in her skill set. He was here for vigilantism, desperate to prove himself, and having Uraraka around for some competition in PE was probably good for both of them. It led the two teaching a few moves to whoever braved asking for it, and Midoriya was one of them. Ida was strict, almost robotic, and desperate to not do any wrong whatsoever. He was a nice person and seemed particularly protective of Midoriya, for whatever reason. He was obviously aiming for class president and had made the fact even clearer only a few days ago, when he shouted at Kaminari for not doing the washing up, since it was his turn. He ended up blowing the fuse in the building, since electric doesn't mix well with water. And the laughter ringing out in the darkness only grew louder when faced with the fact that Tokoyami's dark shadow was probably going to kill them all now. It was safe to say that they all survived. Tokoyami was rather proud of himself for not causing any disaster, and Ida was utterly mortified by the whole ideal. Tsu was honest without a fault, and terribly blunt. She'd already thrown student number 19, Mineta, out the window twice for perverted comments, and refused to apologize. Her frog quirk gave her some interesting abilities, which Midoriya had already interrogated eagerly and written all about it in his notebook. Most prominent was her abnormally long tongue, which she could use to slap Mineta around the face with from a distance. Shoto was harsh, cold, and merciless. But also, utterly useless at friendship. He didn't know what he was doing, and generally just lurked in the background. Midoriya took it upon himself to make sure he felt included, and eventually, everyone else started to see his charm too. Poor Shoto just didn't get it. It wasn't his fault. His frightening exterior hid a personality that Midoriya just clicked with. Also, Kaken left him alone when Shoto was around, which was an added bonus. Finally, there was Yaoyorozu, with the coolest quirk Midoriya had ever seen. She still hadn't revealed why she found herself in Class 1A, but no one was pressurizing her except Mineta, and that was the third time he'd found himself in the bush below the window outside the dorms. She revealed her quirk to Midoriya first, and he did a double take. Ashido, who now insisted they all called her Mina, had accidentally melted the bottom of Midoriya's mug. Ida had labeled them all from 1 to 20 after people kept leaving them in the sink and not washing up. After throwing it away and assuming he'd have to wait until Mr. Aizawa ordered a new one, Midoriya turned around and found Yaoyorozu pulling a brand new mug from her arm and pouring tea into it like it were a completely ordinary thing to do. Midoriya had not fanboyed over something so intensely since he still liked heroes. He might have flustered Yaoyorozu a bit, but come on, she could make anything she wanted at a moment's notice. All she needed was to eat the right diet and not overdo it, and she could quite literally pull a sword from her leg. Oh my God, it was amazing. And then she finally admitted how she got into it. My parents are overprotective, she admitted as they all walked up to the classroom for the beginning of the day. Mr. Aizawa had let them walk there themselves after the first week, which made them all weirdly excited puppy training. It was bad enough to begin with, but when I got my quirk, they just became so constricting. I couldn't take it. I practiced my quirk to no end out of boredom, but when I ran out of ideas, I started sneaking out. She fiddled with her ponytail nervously, as if she were scared about what they might think of her after they knew the truth, but none of them seemed bothered so far. Midoriya certainly wasn't. I wanted to do everything my parents wouldn't let me do. I look a little older than I actually am, so I'd dress up and sneak into parties and stuff, but it was nothing more illegal than sneaking in. At first, I met a group of girls and we became friends, and then there was this situation. We got mugged, but we didn't have any money on us, and I panicked. I made fake notes and handed them over. They let us go, but after that, the girls wanted to do so much more with my quirk. And I just didn't want to disappoint them. I'd never really had friends before, It just went wrong. I have plenty of money myself, but I couldn't take it from my parents without them noticing. I kept making fakes of that and so much more, and it just got out of hand. They sold me out, eventually, when they got caught with the fakes. They said it was my fault, and then my parents found out. They don't sound like real friends to me, Sue insisted. Yeah, don't worry about them ever again. You have us now. Uraraka added with that glowing smile of hers. Yaoyorozu sighed in apparent relief. After everything that happened, I'm happy I ended up here. Yeah, me too. Me 3 ribbit. Neither Shoto, Ida nor Midoriya added to that. Maybe they weren't quite sure of their answer yet. They reached classy. Ida was always insistent that they were the first to arrive, but everyone else wasn't that far behind anyway. Kaken was still stewing in silence whilst his new, friendship group laughed at him. Someone had written Kaken in pink, permanent marker on the whiteboard back at the dorms. He'd spent the morning trying to rub it off, but Mina had accidentally melted all their whiteboard pens, so he couldn't do the trick where you wrote on top of the permanent pen to wipe it away. But he had found the permanent marker, and now nearly everyone had ridiculous nicknames in hot pink. Right on time, as always, Mr. Aizawa walked through the door and the class quickly grew quiet. He had that effect on them, especially when he was carrying a large cardboard box as well as his sleeping bag. Midoriya was tempted to ask if he was restocking the supply of fruit pouches he hid in his desk, or yogurt or jelly, or whatever they were. But the way he slammed it down on the table and looked at them all made him think otherwise. Congratulations, you're 1 week into UA, which means it's time for the next step, Aizawa announced, and suddenly everyone was far more interested. Class A doesn't usually learn to talk to each other for a week or so, but you've outdone yourself. These were initially implicated so that you could easily contact me if, for example, someone's quirk is going haywire. Without further explanation, Mr. Aizawa picked the box back up and made his way around the room. Midoriya frowned in utter confusion when he was handed a brick phone, labeled 18 across the back, as well as a charger. You have each other's numbers already inserted as well as mine. He raised another brick phone that he had in his pocket, and a few other teachers. You should only be able to contact these specialized phones. If you even try to contact someone else, they will be confiscated. We can read all your messages. Midoriya looked down at his and turned it on. It was primitive, only for texting and calls. He had contacts labeled 1 to 20, missing out 18 of course, as well as Mr. Aizawa, Vlad King, and even Midnight. Other than that, there was one group chat set up, which all his contacts, excluding Vlad King and Midnight, were in. He could change the contact names, easy. The others wouldn't be able to see what he'd changed the names to, but no matter. There was no Add New Contact button. Someone had somehow removed it from the screen entirely and likely disabled the function too. He couldn't delete any contacts either. But it wouldn't be hard to work around that. He could probably restore everything in under 5 minutes. The technology was too old to connect to the internet, but if he got Yaoyorozu to make him a couple of things then maybe he could. And 18. Midoriya flinched and slowly looked up at Mr. Aizawa. Don't. He gulped and slowly put the phone back down. It immediately let out a soft beep. Midoriya turned it over again to see. 20-18 don't? Midoriya knew better than to answer whilst Mr. Aizawa watched over them like a hawk. Principal Nizu can also see all your messages. And everyone put their phones down, the beeping noises echoing around the room stopping immediately. Mr. Aizawa sighed as he flat-packed the empty box and knocked it off the table. 1 week in and I have something else to remind you of, choosing class president. Midoriya saw Ida perk up from across the room. Being class president meant proving that you were responsible and the most trusted out of all of class. When, in the future, you were questioned about your time in the infamous class, you could say, actually, I was selected as the leader and was highly trusted by my peers and my teachers. If Ida ever hoped to get back on the hero course track, being class president was his best bet. Of course, it would be easy for Ida to get the role. He was the best behaved, already ordered people around, and kept the dorms clean. He was the perfect candidate. Only problem is that people didn't always listen to him, but that was Class A for you. They'd never listen to any kind of authority. Usually, a class representative is chosen by the class, Mr. Aizawa explained, but it doesn't work that way here. I will select them when they fulfill the most important criteria. Ida raised his hand. And what would that be, sir? Midoriya saw a few of his classmates roll their eyes and chuckle. He wasn't the only one who knew Ida desperately wanted the role. I've been teaching Class A for years, and I know that you lot won't listen to me or anyone else as much as you would to one of your own. Your class president will be whoever ends up at the top of the pecking order. Midoriya slumped back into his chair. It wasn't him then. But Ida still had a shot. He'd help him out in the best way he could. Whoever I choose can then select a vice president. Oh, and you can't back out of being class president. My decision is final, finished their teacher. That's all. Try not to kill your Japanese teacher. I think you'd make a great class president, Ida. Uraraka exclaimed as they all sat down together for lunch. Thank you, but only Mr. Aizawa can deem me worthy. Sounds like it's the rest of the class which does that, Sue acknowledged. Don't any of you want the role? Ida frowned. It could give you such opportunity in the future. It's not for me, Uraraka admitted, before shoveling more food in her mouth. I wouldn't mind it, Yaoyorozu interjected, although I doubt I'll be selected. What about you, Midoriya? Oh, I won't be chosen either. Top of the pecking order and someone everyone listens to? Sounds more like Kaken to me. Uraraka laughed. The only reason everyone listens to Kaken is because he's so loud. And no one takes him seriously. Bakugo would make a bad class president, said Shoto, who rarely participated in conversations, probably because he didn't know what to say. Uraraka giggled again. Oh, just imagine. Bakugo trying to make everyone wash the dishes, Ribbit, Azui grinned. Wash the dishes or I kill you. Die, die, die. Uraraka mimicked, slamming her hands on the table as she did so, and Shoto had to hold his water still to make sure it didn't fall over. I think someone would frisbee a plate at his face, Midoriya sniggered. Oh my god, yes. But you would break the plates? Ida exclaimed, chopping his hands through the air like he always did when he was telling someone off. Exactly, Uraraka replied, then you wouldn't have to wash them up. And UA would just replace them. Everything's practically free here, it's great. Midoriya was thinking about how especially great the food was, before he dropped his chopsticks in shock and held his hands over his ears. A loud, shrill alarm had filled the hall. Within seconds, people had started to panic. Plates of food were abandoned, and the entire school began to run for the exit. Let's go, everybody! Ida called out, getting to his feet. Uraraka looked mournfully down at her food. But lunch? Midoriya pouted. Well, I think I'll just stay here, and he shoveled some rice into his mouth. Everyone but Ida hesitated and sat back down. But the alarm! Ida exclaimed. Well, it's not a fire, Midoriya said. We had one over the weekend, remember? Some support students set fire to something and the alarm sounded nothing like this. Oh yeah, Uraraka remembered. So, what's this alarm for? I don't know, but they never drilled us for it. I say it's their fault if something happens. They didn't tell us what this meant, Yayarosa decided, starting on her food again too. But everyone else is evacuating. Ida persisted, gesturing towards the panicked stream of students. Midoriya laughed. They're not going anywhere in that corridor, it'll be filled to the brim. We're probably safer here. If it's a villain attack, why would they target Class A anyway? Shoto pointed out. Midoriya nodded. Exactly. Besides, Shoto can fight any fire for us. Shoto didn't even argue with it. Sure, whatever. Ida looked lost for words. Perhaps he would have tried to get them moving again if their phones didn't beep at them in that moment. Class 1A group chat. 7 Does anyone know what's going on? 8 Who's that not evacuating? 5 We're hungry. 5 Midoriya said it's not a fire alarm. 18 The fire alarm sounded different. 5 Also look at this food going to waste. 5 Disgraceful. 4th May I suggest we all swiftly exit the building? 7 Nah, let's burn to death. 18 We have Shoto. 7 Everyone but the guys with 15, let's burn to death. 2 Death. 7 Death. 18 Can't the teachers read this chat? 2 Death. 17 You're all freaking idiots. 13 You're not moving either. 7 Does he care about us? 5 Kaken cares. 2 Oh, we love you, Kaken. 17 You better hope that fire gets you before I do. There was a yell and a small explosion from across the hall, and everyone in Class A started laughing, the sound echoing around the emptied room when the alarm finally stopped blaring. Jiro's yell of, "Finally!" made them all laugh harder. It wasn't until much later that they were finally told that the press had invaded campus, and that set of an intruder alarm. Mr. Aizawa gave them some stern words for not leaving, but none of them took it to heart. Midoriya could have sworn he glared at him more than everyone else. He gave him a look so menacing that Midoriya was quite certain his eyes glowed red for a moment, when Midoriya asked why the press felt the need to break in like that. The press always get excited at the beginning of UA, Mr. Aizawa sighed, rubbing his eyes. They want to know about you lot. With 15 here, they're slightly more desperate for information than usual. Midoriya supposed that made sense. Imagine all the articles they could write if they got even the smallest story behind one of his classmates. Oh, and All Might's teaching the hero course this year, so they probably want to know about how that's going. The entire class perked up. None of them had heard about All Might, the #1 hero, nor seen him. Midoriya's glare simply hardened, and he knew Mr. Aizawa had noted the change in his expression. It's good to have dreams, young man. Just make sure they're attainable. Midoriya had met All Might. It must have been 10 months ago now. His old idol, the #1 hero of Japan, had rescued him from a villain made of sludge. When asking him if someone like Midoriya could be a hero too. And then the man deflated. The impossibly tall, muscular symbol of peace shrunk into a skeletal man with an ugly scar on his side. All Might's quirk kept up the illusion of near-to invulnerability, but now Midoriya knew the truth. After a fight hidden from the rest of the world, 5 to 6 years ago now, All Might had been weakened. And the whole encounter was stupid anyway. The sludge villain escaped and almost killed Kakin. If Midoriya hadn't stepped in, when all the other heroes he once admired had given up, he would have died. Sure, All Might turned up again at the last second, but Midoriya's point had been made: heroes weren't all they were cracked up to be. After being scolded for jumping in like that, Midoriya ripped the hero posters from his walls, knocked the merchandise he'd spent years collecting into boxes, and hid it all beneath his bed. His room was bare, just like his dreams. It was in that moment that he had decided to make a difference. He stared at the last hero analysis book he ever made, one scorched and burnt after Kakin had casually told him to just go and kill himself and tossed it in a pond. All Might had signed it too, ignoring the damage, just like everyone else, and Midoriya concluded that Kakin needed to be dealt with. The school knew what Kakin had been doing to Midoriya. They turned a blind eye to it. If Kakin got into UA's hero course, they could hail his successes forevermore as being because of their excellent teaching. But punishing him for bullying would ruin that, so they ignored it. They never expected Midoriya to hack into their security network and save the files they so carefully tried to dispose of and go to the police with his evidence. The school was still under investigation, last Midoriya knew of it, and of course, Kakin ended up in Class A. It was all going so perfect, until his mother got a letter from UA too. It was All Might's fault Midoriya slipped. His fault it all ended up like this. Now Midoriya had thought through it, he was sure. Maybe it was him who recommended he were sent to UA. Jiro was sent here because she knew something that she shouldn't have known, right? Did she know the same thing Midoriya did? Did she know about All Might's weakness too? Or do the heroes hide even more dirty secrets? When Mr. Aizawa was leaving the classroom to let their afternoon lessons begin, he must have noticed Midoriya's smile, because he hesitated. He'd always paid particular attention to him, and now Midoriya knew why. Oh, the heroes thought he was dangerous. They saw how angry he was at them after the sludge villain attack, saw how he brought Kakin down without lifting a finger in any violent affair, and realized what Midoriya knew. And they thought the best place for him was class, somewhere they could keep an eye on him, and maybe retrain a love of heroes. Midoriya dared to look back at Mr. Aizawa and smiled a little wider. He knew why he was here. Now he just needed to figure out what he wanted to do with it. The first meeting of the term was held a day late this year. Principal Nizu needed to deal with the situation with the press, and that took priority over the annual Class 1A report. There were 2 every term, one at the start and one at the end. Aizawa would visit the principal and tell him of any progress or concerns he had over his pupils. The first one was the most interesting, of course, since it involved him finally giving his initial thoughts of the students he'd only seen on paper prior to the year's beginning. Today was to be a busy day, hence it being rather annoying that the meeting was delayed, but Nizu was still seemingly keen to get it over and done with. The 2 heroes sat in silence, facing each other for a few seconds too long. Aizawa sighed as he lifted the 20 files onto the desk before them. A little thicker than they had been when the principal had last laid his eyes on them, but not by much. It had only been a week, after all. Number order? Nizu suggested innocently. Aizawa gave him a look. I'll leave you to look over the files yourself. For a majority of them, there isn't much to say or discuss. A majority? He repeated. Aizawa was more than frustrated by this supposed naivety. Sliding the stack of files across the table to be dutifully ignored, Aizawa leant back in his chair and crossed his arms. 18 is becoming problematic. Quicker than expected, Nizu simply smiled, taking a sip of his green tea. Are you sure it was a good idea to put him in this class? Aizawa dared to acknowledge. Nizu put down his cup as he listened. The longer he stays here, the worse he'll get. He was so cautious for the first few days, but the moment he realized All Might was teaching here, something changed. He realized why he was enrolled in Class 1A. Nizu nodded. I would expect a change in attitude after that. Midoriya needed the confidence to recognize his potential. He'll be a quite different person to manage from here on out. Aizawa wavered. He's not a genius. Oh no, Nizu smiled, shaking his head. He doesn't have an intelligence quirk, nor does he have a fluke in his genetics to give him smarts to rival such an ability. Not to my knowledge, at least. Ida bests him in most subjects, and once Yaoyorozu finally began to apply herself, she quickly outdid him too. Bakugo isn't someone to cast aside either. Midoriya is definitely in the top, but by no means is he the top. He had much bigger fish to fry in middle school. No, he has a different kind of intelligence, one with people. Aizawa just stared at Nizu as he refilled his teacup. Aizawa's own lay abandoned, quickly getting cold. But it's because of him that the entire class is so close-knit, the teacher explained. Most of my classes took up to a month to finally start talking to each other. It took this one half a day, because Midoriya made them all write their names next to their student numbers back at the dorms. And then Mike said he promptly wrote everything down in a notebook and started collecting their strengths and weaknesses, and had previously done the same for many heroes, including him. Now the entire class is taking advantage of his stupid bug phobia whilst Midoriya sits back and watches it happen. Did you see what they did during the alarm yesterday? Midoriya told them to ignore it, and not a single one of them questioned him. He's achieved exactly what you predicted he would, and in 1 week. And Todoroki? Was all Nizu said in reply. Seems to be close to Midoriya. He's the only one he'll actively speak to. Nizu's smile grew wider still. How excellent. I suggest we leave them be for a while. The real test will be the sports festival, and the home visit that follows. Aizawa rubbed nonchalantly at his temples. Bakugo is definitely one of Midoriya's loose ends. The two despise each other and he's the only one that actively works against Midoriya. It doesn't help that the rest of the class jumps in to protect him from Bakugo. It makes him angrier. At this rate I can't see either of them graduating. Both are getting worse. Putting Midoriya in here may have caused more problems than it solved. The other students would probably behave a lot better if they didn't have Midoriya either intentionally or unintentionally edging them on. It'll be unintentional at this point, Nizu hummed to himself. I think he and All Might should have a class together. We could send Class A with Class B during their rescue training. I heard that Midoriya had an altercation with someone from the hero course recently. Monoma, Aizawa sighed. Midoriya managed to convince him that he had the ability to steal other quirks and all of Class A played along. Aizawa noted how Nizu's paw hesitated at his cup of tea. Did he now? He almost whispered. I knew he'd convinced the hero course that he had a quirk, but I was not aware of the nature of it. Remarkable. I wonder how long that will last. You didn't give up their game, did you? No. I thought you would be interested in how that would turn out. I assume you are too. Naturally. Another too long moment of silence passed whilst Nizu finished his fourth cup of tea. Aizawa just stared at it, as though willing it to transform into coffee. How long do you recommend we wait until we do some therapy sessions with the individuals this year? Nizu asked, glancing at an untouched form to the side of the files Aizawa had given him. We'll need some more time, Aizawa admitted. None of them trust a single member of staff enough yet, let alone any stranger asking them about their mental health. It'll make them feel more insecure, and I don't want Todoroki to lock himself away from everyone again, especially Midoriya. We may have to wait until after the sports festival at least. I trust your judgment, Nizu agreed, sliding the form out of sight for now. He glanced at the files. Tell me, what are your thoughts on Little Miss Zero? Absolutely no one in Class A was looking forward to the day when Mr. Aizawa announced that they'd be accompanying Class B to a specialized training facility on the other end of campus to help with their rescue training. This easily translated to various groups sitting in fake disaster zones, calling out, "Help, my leg, it is broken," in the most bored tone in the world, whilst waiting for the amateur heroes to roughly rescue them. And if that couldn't get any worse, they would be accompanied by not 2, not 3, but 4 heroes, Mr. Aizawa, the head of Class B, Vlad King, the hero in charge of the rescue facility they'd be utilizing, 13, and All Might. Midoriya was wondering if the hero course could just let him die. So, hear me out right, 13, the hero, and 13, the student, Mina giggled. They were on the bus on the way to the training facility they'd be meeting Class B at. They were all in their PE kits, grudgingly ready to be tossed around by the hero course for the rest of the morning. "Zero, you've got to answer to 13 for the rest of the day," Kaminari insisted. "Just imagine class be calling for help or something. Oh, 13, can you?" And then Zero swoops in front of them, added Mina. "Maybe they'll learn to stop calling us by numbers," Zero sighed. "Speaking of numbers, anyone have any idea how to silence these stupid things?" called out Hagakure, waving her brick phone in the air, labeled 16 in red. "I haven't figured out how to do anything except call and text," Jiro ummed. "I miss my music." The bus had a rather open-plan layout, and on a long row of seats, Midoriya sat beside Shoto and Yaoyorozu. The taller girl leant over to Midoriya and asked, curiously, "What did Mr. Aizawa mean by don't the other day?" "You never explained." In a hushed voice, he replied, "I am a of stuff." "Oh, so you could theoretically. I could restore the phones to their original function? Yeah, easily allow us access to settings, deleting contacts, adding them, calling whoever we want. I might need to take it apart and put it back together. It could take a little longer to stop the teachers from being able to read our messages, and I wouldn't be able to connect them to the internet at all without a little more air. Pieces, the software just doesn't exist in these things." Midoriya took his own phone out of his pocket. Everyone had taken theirs with them. Didn't need to, but having them was like a little piece of freedom, despite their obvious limitations. After the initial fear of the principal reading all their messages, they'd loosened up. The most recent conversation in the group chat had been held in the middle of the night, which had started on the topic of how sleep was a waste of time and ended a few hours later about the blood type preferences of mosquitoes. The bus ride didn't last long. The UA grounds were massive. Midoriya gazed out the window nearly the entire time. The campus was surrounded by walls, and then mostly lined with trees. Beyond the main school, which Midoriya hadn't left for a week now, were numerous hero training grounds, including what they were heading towards. They dragged their feet when getting off the bus. Class B was waiting for them, just inside the large, dome-shaped building, all dressed up in their hero outfits. "Line up," Mr. Aizawa ordered. Kaken roughly pushed between Midoriya and Hagakure as they took the positions that they'd been forced to practice every day for the last week. Whilst Mr. Aizawa went to talk to the other two heroes present, Vlad King and 13, Class A awkwardly stood in their place, and Class B turned to them. "Look at them line up in number order," sniggered Monoma, and a good majority of his class followed suit. "Wow," Jiro deadpanned, "look at their pretty little outfits." "Where'd you get yours, Monoma?" "A fancy dress shop." Now it was Class A's turn to laugh, although the trainee heroes didn't seem that bothered, not even Monoma. "Does it have any function?" Yaoyorozu asked him. "What would the likes of you know about hero costumes?" Monoma scoffed. He was wearing a suit, and an ugly one at that. Midoriya could barely do his own tie-up properly, but he could still wrinkle his nose at what Monoma was sporting, at least in terms of practicality. His blazer was long-tailed, and that couldn't have been helpful in any feasible situation. His shirt collar was upturned, and his blue tie, although done up correctly, was covered in black polka dots. The only thing Midoriya could spy that was of any use whatsoever were the stopwatches attached to his belt. "More than you, apparently," Midoriya dared to speak up. Monoma laughed. He had such a dull, mocking laugh. "You already know about my quirk since you decided to have a go. I don't need any specialized items." The entirety of Class A knew about Midoriya's little trick from all the way back on the second day of term. After Mr. Aizawa had warned him about what consequences may befall afterwards, Uraraka told the story of how Midoriya and Todoroki somehow got Monoma to believe that Midoriya could steal quirks, after his quirklessness cancelled out Monoma's copying ability. "I could think of a dozen specialized items," Midoriya retorted. "For one, a jacket without tails that could easily catch fire. Since you do have a quirk that allows you to copy fire quirks, which are rather common, fireproofing should be one of the first things you thought of. It would also be a good idea to have some kind of weapon that you don't need to use your quirk for. You're relying too heavily on your abilities that already rely on someone else's. You need to be able to fight quirkless and be good at it, and your stiff costume really won't help, especially when you need to be able to move fast and get in close to touch someone and gain their power, and then likely move away to have the time to figure out how to use it. I hope your shoes don't give you blisters, he said in a way that implied that he hoped the opposite. Everyone stared at him for a few moments, including the pro-heroes. Midoriya tried not to cower under their scrutiny, but he could have sworn he saw Mr. Aizawa smile. Wow, you really know your stuff, blinked a member of Class B in an orange and black armored costume. He held a similarly colored helmet under his arm, so Midoriya could see his face. He didn't seem to have any lips, so all his teeth were on full show. It was kind of scary, but at least his costume was better than Minoma's. He would have to, with a quirk like his, said the ginger-haired girl that Minoma had been with back when they first met. Hi, she smiled. I'm Kendo, I'm Class B's new representative. Your costume's pretty, Mina called out. Hey, thanks, she grinned, glancing down at her blue, knee-length cheapao. She had free movement and practical boots. She also wore a utility belt and even black shorts underneath the short dress. Minoma should have taken notes. Kendo had clearly thought this through. Midoriya didn't even know what her quirk was, but for some reason, he was thinking it would be something to do with martial arts. Kendo, Minoma interrupted, we shouldn't be associating with the inferior class. Oh, come on, Minoma, just because you and 18 don't get along doesn't mean we all have to hate each other. Plus, you two have similar quirks, maybe you could learn from one another, Kendo suggested with a bright smile. Midoriya couldn't tell if she was faking being that nice or if it was genuine. She had told him off for scaring Minoma back then, but maybe she'd forgiven him? Perhaps he'd simply been deprived of nice people who didn't have ulterior motives, didn't care, or who also happened to be villains. Nice villains, huh? Midoriya would have once called that an oxymoron. The two words just didn't seem to fit together. Now it was nice hero that sounded off. Midoriya had figured it out now. He'd had it wrong all his life. It made sense though, this whole world was run by heroes, so of course he'd trust them, worship them even. But the system only worked because they pushed down those who resisted. That's what Class A was for, right? For as long as he'd known, everyone had pushed him down, told him he was worthless, powerless. But Mr. Aizawa was right. There was power in what he thought was powerlessness. Midoriya may not have a quirk, no. Strength, no. Fire or ice or speed, but he had his mind. He could make a difference, just not perhaps in the way he once thought. He didn't know what he wanted to do yet. He had the ammunition, he just didn't know where to fire the gun. But that ammunition made them nervous, them being the heroes. So, they slapped another label on him, on top of quirkless and useless, villainous and dangerous. And that made him smile. He'd found himself, and he was a villain, not a hero. Yue would have been better off just leaving him alone. Shut up. You don't know who the hell you're dealing with. Midoriya blinked, and suddenly Kaken was fighting with Minoma. Midoriya had kind of lost himself to his thoughts, which was a common occurrence. The teachers didn't seem to be intervening either. He wondered if they were stalling, since All Might hadn't arrived yet, or perhaps they were just interested in seeing what would happen between Class A and B. It sounded like something Mr. Aizawa would do. Before he knew it, Kaken had grabbed the front of Midoriya's shirt and hauled him up to his height. This is your fault, he hissed for at least the 5th time that week. Midoriya would have once squirmed and shrunk under his gaze, but since he'd been at Yue, despite how short of a time that was, he'd come to realize there was no point in acting like that. A real villain wouldn't back down from a fight. He pushed Kaken's hands away with a sigh, so calmly that Kaken almost backed away in surprise. Yes, we've already established that, Kaken. Seriously, Midoriya, are you ever going to tell us what you did? Laughed Kaminari, and Class B just looked nervous. He supposed that's where most of his confidence came from. He'd spent so long working on getting Kaken into Class A. Over around 5 months, Midoriya had bettered his skills in hacking. He'd read up on laws, spent hours shut up in his room, growing more and more bitter. There's no way he could have backed out after that. I should be on the freaking hero course. Kaken yelled, cupping little explosions in his hands, almost spitting in Midoriya's face. Oh really? Minoma laughed. Imagine, a villain in our class? You can't be a hero. That's enough. Mr. Aizawa stepped forwards, and they all went silent. His eyes did that thing where they glow red for a moment again. Midoriya could have sworn his hair floated that time as well. He sighed. Your class president is right, you're here to learn from one another. Class B as well as Class A. He stood in front of the line that Class A maintained, crossing his arms as he faced Class B sternly. If you tell any of my students that they don't have a chance again, then maybe you don't deserve yours. The cocky smile faded quickly from Monoma's face. He turned away, averting his gaze with a hint of embarrassment in his eyes. Anyone can be a hero, some roads are just rockier than others. And Midoriya blinked at his teacher, the words striking a chord in his heartstrings that he had been sure couldn't be played anymore. He stared at the back of Mr. Aizawa's head, tilting his own to one side whilst he wondered how rocky his road had been. Because who better to teach Class A than someone who had? Oh, Midoriya found himself saying out loud, and everyone turned to him. His eyes flickered to them all nervously, before settling back on Mr. Aizawa. Eraserhead, that's your hero name, right? He said nothing, but the chill in his eyes seemed to have faded. Ooh, you used to be in Class A, didn't you? Mr. Aizawa cracked a smile. That took you longer than I expected. Midoriya only frowned when his teacher turned back to the others. Speaking of which, we're going to have to start without him. We've waited here long enough. Where's All Might? Asked one of Class B. Midoriya didn't register who, because he was too busy thinking. He figures one thing out, thinks he can see the world clearly, and then something else trips him up and he finds himself kneeling in the dirt again. Mr. Aizawa graduated Class A. And he was a hero, an underground one at that. Midoriya didn't know much about him. He wasn't exactly the type to seek the spotlight, but maybe that was the point. He was quite sure he'd gotten into the class as a vigilante, and essentially ended his years at UA as a vigilante with a license and carried on with what he'd always been doing. He got waylaid with some villains, Mr. Aizawa vaguely explained. Midoriya knew that wasn't the whole truth though. His time limit must have run out on him. Vlad King cleared his throat and stepped forwards. Right, today we will be focusing on rescue training. Members of Class A will be rescued by Class B in fake scenarios using... Wait, we have to be rescued? Gaped Jiro, Mr. Aizawa's kind words immediately being lost to the past. Midoriya had thought this was quite obvious, but apparently not as much as he'd thought. Mr. Aizawa ignored her completely. One member of Class B will be paired up with a member of Class A. Vlad, you can choose who goes with who, we'll be changing it up next time anyway. Alright, 13, did you want to explain the facilities here? Looks like a theme park to me, sir. Ciro butted in before the hero 13 could say a word. The teachers glared at him whilst Class A chuckled under their breath. I have an idea, he continued. To avoid confusion, why don't you be 13, and why don't you just call me by my name? Alright, 13 stammered. Well, welcome to the unforeseen simulation joint? The USJ? Mina said innocently. Yes, it's Universal Studios Japan? That's literally a theme park. Ciro exclaimed. Whilst this conversation was batted back and forth like a tennis match, Midoriya's eyes wandered to his surroundings. The large dome was split into several zones, depicting different disasters, like fire, landslides, or shipwrecks. Midoriya was trying not to smile, thinking about Kaken being forced to participate in these fake rescue exercises, where he couldn't be the hero. The smile faded when he realized that he'd find himself in the same situation. He just hoped Monoma wouldn't be the one rescuing him. Why was there a fountain in the middle? What was the purpose? Some rogue quirk was bound to blow it up at some point anyway, and then they'd have to block the area off until it could be fixed up again. 18, focus, said Mr. Aizawa. Midoriya snapped out of his daydreams and turned back to the class. He found himself standing next to Kendo. We partnered up, she whispered to him, and we're going over to the landslide zone. Oh, thanks, Midoriya muttered in reply. He was just glad Mr. Aizawa hadn't decided to teach him a lesson by pairing him up with Monoma, who was with Kaken instead. Midoriya grinned. They started walking in a line behind the teachers. He supposed they'd been paired up with the hero class like this to stop them from running off and doing something stupid, which sounded like something which could have easily happened before. Finding the situation awkward, Midoriya tried to make conversation with the hero girl he was with. He nudged her side and indicated towards the fountain. What do you think the point of the fountain is? She started after a moment's hesitation. Not sure, because it looks nice. But it's in the way. Wouldn't a central battle arena or something be more useful? Maybe, but there are benches. It's like a rest area. That doesn't warrant the presence of a fountain. Oh, would you shut up? Kakin yelled back at him. This, of course, spurred Midoriya to keep talking, and the greenery around it, they'd have to get people in here to look after it, which is unnecessary. Unless they had a, sprinkler system? See? It's all so complicated, and what's the strange purple light? It doesn't even look nice. Kendo glanced back over Midoriya's shoulder. What, purple light? Midoriya stopped. That one. What's going on? Asked Yaoyorozu. They were at the back of the group, but everyone soon stopped. Midoriya's observation seemed to confuse the teachers too. And as that swirling, purple vortex grew bigger, it became clear that it wasn't supposed to be there at all. A pale hand reached through, pushing the light apart like a set of curtains, stepping out like he were on a stage. And God, it was a large cast, because more followed, so many that Midoriya couldn't count. What's going on? Asked Kirishima, taking a few steps back. The steel-themed hero student beside him mimicked his movements. Is this part of the training exercise? Asked a particularly optimistic member of Class B. No, Mr. Aizawa replied sharply. No, those are real villains, stay back. He pulled at his scarf, which Midoriya now realized was a hero support item and not just a portable pillow. Where is he? Rang out the voice of the pale man in the center, covered in detached hands. Where is All Might? Who are you? What do you want? Vlad King called out, his gruff voice holding an unspoken threat. Such a pity, the villain sighed, turning to the two men either side of him. Well, Midoriya could hardly call them that. One towered above his counterparts, with a face like a beak and an exposed brain. The other seemed to be made of purple-black mist, with imposing, golden eyes. He'll turn up, I'm sure. Why don't we complete our other target whilst we wait? Midoriya didn't like the sound of that. Class A? We're here to liberate you. Go, run now. Mr. Aizawa called out, pushing a set of iconic yellow goggles over his eyes, once hidden underneath his scarf. 13. Protect the students. Vlad, come with me. 13 immediately began to usher the students towards the exit, but it was clear they were unsure of what they should be doing. Wait, no. Midoriya suddenly found himself calling out, Mr. Aizawa, your fighting style isn't suited for this. Mr. Aizawa blinked back at him. No hero's a one-trick pony kid. And the two teachers charged down the rest of the stairs at the swarm of villains. Wait, why did Midoriya say that? Why? Who? What side was he on? Who should he be fighting against here? Class B. Stick with your partners. 13 ordered. Midoriya felt Kendo's hand grip his arm and pull him backwards. Come on, she exclaimed. Was she saving him or holding him prisoner? He wasn't the only one confused. Most of Class A tried to lag back, glancing at each other as if they could find the answer there. Midoriya gritted his teeth. No, this wasn't right. They needed to run. We need to go. Come on, he exclaimed, allowing Kendo to pull him forwards, and the others soon followed. Their hesitation, however, would be their downfall. Because in seconds, they were surrounded by a purple fog and the gleaming eyes of the mist villain appeared before them, blocking the exit. Why are you running? He asked them all with genuine curiosity. Come now, those who call themselves heroes keep you captive. We are the League of Villains, join us. That's a stupid name, was all Midoriya could utter, almost choking on the words in fear. Stay back, cried out 13, stepping in front of them all. I'm warning you. They pointed a finger menacingly, ready to activate their deadly quirk, Black Hole. Shigaraki is waiting for All Might, the fog villain said simply. We shall leave only once he has met his demise. You want to kill All Might? Midoriya gaped. Was that even possible? Maybe with his weakness, but did they know about that? Then you leave me no choice. And 13's quirk was activated, pulling the edges of the fog into the tip of their finger, obliterating it instantly. But the villain was prepared. Immediately, another swirling, Purple light appeared behind 13, and their own quirk ripped at the back of their astronaut-themed costume. They fell to the ground with the despaired screams of Midoriya's classmates, Class A and B alike. The shock lasted barely a second, before someone leapt to 13's rescue. Kaken! No! Midoriya cried out as his old friend propelled himself forward with his explosions, ready to fill the villain with his own smoke and fire. The villain reacted instantly. His fog spread around them once again. Midoriya shielded his face from the dust and rock caught up in the vortex that engulfed him. All of a sudden, he felt the sound around him fade and the ground disappearing from beneath his feet. With no time to take a breath, Midoriya plunged into the water. In the surprise of it all, he tried to breathe, inhaling only liquid. He reached the surface with a kick of his legs, coughing and spluttering. He tried to get his bearings, pushing his soaking hair from his eyes as he tread water. He was in the shipwreck zone. He'd been teleported halfway across the USJ. The boat was closest. He tried to swim towards it, but within seconds, was pulled back under the water. The red bands. He's Class A idiot. It was a villain with the head of a shark, snapping at another under the water, who held onto Midoriya's ankle as he struggled to get free, quickly running out of air in the panic. Midoriya! Called out a familiar, croaky voice. In a blur, the villain holding him down was pushed away, and Midoriya was flung above the surface. He'd been closer to the boat than he thought because he slammed harshly onto the deck, and soon after, Tsu leapt out of the water and to his side. Are you okay, Ribbit? Midoriya rolled over and coughed up the rest of the water in his lungs, taking in deep, cleansing breaths of air. He took a hand reached out to him, shaking as he got to his feet. Just? That warp villain separated us, explained the guy who had helped Midoriya up. It was the hero student with the scary teeth and practical armor, but he seemed to have lost his helmet. It's easier to take us on in smaller groups. Midoriya stumbled over to the edge of the ship and looked down. A disturbing number of gleaming eyes stared back up at him from just below the surface. He backed away. We should be safe here for now, thank you, Tsu, Midoriya sighed. It's okay, she nodded. Can you swim? Yeah, I was just a little shocked, sorry for almost drowning on you. Thank you for helping me too, said the hero student, rubbing his head. I was the one supposed to be rescuing you, but it looks like it was the opposite way around today. I'm Hananuki, nice to meet you. I'm Azui, but you can call me Tsu. This is Midoriya, and that's my Neta, Ribbit. Midoriya turned to see short number 19, sitting in a soggy ball and shivering in the corner, obviously terrified by the experience. After a moment of silence, Hananuki spoke up again. I can't believe that just happened. They came out of nowhere. Literally, Midoriya added, trying to shake the water from his hair. Hananuki glanced at him. Midoriya noted a slight fear in his eyes. What had Monoma said about him to the rest of his class? For a moment there, I really thought the rest of Class A would run to the villains. Midoriya and Tsu stared at him for a moment, until Midoriya bowed his head and said, So did I. Then, why didn't you? I don't know. Well, thank you for not. Come on, kids, we don't have all day, yelled one of the villains from the water. The four of them, yes, including Mineta, wandered to the edge of the boat and gazed down. Toss the hero, another laughed. Yeah, come on, we'll take you three home and dry. You know you want to. Midoriya saw how Hananuki tensed and glanced at Midoriya and Tsu, either side of him. It's 3 against 1. And Tsu slapped Mineta across the ship's deck with her tongue. We're not tossing you overboard, Ribbit. Hananuki breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks. But this is a shipwreck simulation. It's only a matter of time before one of the villains figures out how to activate the sequence and this boat will sink, Ribbit. There's got to be another way out of here, Tsu pondered, and she turned to Midoriya. Why are you looking at me? I thought you were the smart one, Ribbit. I wouldn't say that. You're 18, right? Hananuki interjected, rather wary that Mineta had gotten back up and reached their side. The one that could steal Monoma's quirk? Could you use that on the villains? Midoriya smiled weakly and crouched down, out of sight of the villains. The other two followed suit, and Mineta didn't need to. What about that? Midoriya hastily cleared his throat. I might have tricked Monoma into thinking I could steal his quirk. Hananuki stared at him. But how? My, quirk reacted with his and cancelled it out. I played along and pretended that I took it. Midoriya fiddled with his thumbs, glancing back at Hananuki nervously. You see, I'm actually quirkless. Hananuki blinked whilst Midoriya grinned anxiously at him. So, Monoma copied, not having a quirk. I didn't know it was possible to be quirkless any. You really don't have a power at all. No, I'm extraordinary, with a space in the middle. It took a moment for him to laugh. What's your quirk? Can you use it to get us out of here? Midoriya asked, painstakingly aware of the time they were wasting. Not really, he winced. My quirk is softening. He reached back and sunk his hand into the boat. I can make any non-living object softer. I can essentially turn it into quicksand. With a second tap, the wall became solid again. It's an incredible quirk, Midoriya exclaimed, but not very useful in the water. I know, I'm sorry. If only I could be of more use. My quirk is frog, Sue explained quickly. I can do anything a frog can, swim fast, jump high, stick to walls. I have a really long tongue. I can eject my whole stomach and give out a weak toxin, but that's not particularly useful at the moment either. Wow, you'd make a really good hero. With a quirk like that, Hananuki insisted. Well, I did get put in Class A for vigilantism, Ribbit. I see. I stick to stuff too. The three of them turned to glare at Mineta as he took one of the purple ball on his head off and stuck it to the wall of the boat. Well, my hair I just bounce right off them. They stared at him. He seemed to well up. What? I'm just trying to help. Midoriya doesn't even have a quirk, he whined. But Midoriya didn't suggest throwing Hananuki overboard, Ribbit, Sue reminded him. He sobbed louder. I just want to live. Ugh, this is taking too long, was the voice of one of the villains. Midoriya stood up to see him begin to clamber up the side of the boat. No. Go away. Mineta cried, leaning over the barricade and tossing his hairball at the villain, who in surprise, dodged and dived back into the water. The rest of them avoided the purple projectiles the best they could, washing them away carefully. Midoriya narrowed his eyes, and then realized something. He turned back to the others. They don't know what our quirks are. Okay, but how does that help us, Ribbit? Sue questioned. Hananuki grinned at Midoriya with a greater understanding. Just like Monoma didn't know yours. Exactly, we can fake having something we don't to give us a greater advantage. Midoriya smiled slyly. But what do we do? Midoriya turned to Mineta. I have an idea. Not long after, the villains were bombarded with dozens of sticky purple ball. They floated around in the water, sticking to their shoulders and hands. They tried to pry them off, but the effort was in vain. Midoriya stood up beside Mineta, whose scalp was bleeding and eyes were watering. Listen up, Midoriya exclaimed. With just a click of my fingers, those little bombs that you're stuck to will blow you sky high. So, I'd suggest not giving me reason to do so. And if you think that I'm bluffing, consider what class I'm in, and think again. Midoriya may have looked calm and collected on the outside, his green eyes gleaming with malice, but inside he was more terrified than ever. So, back off, we're leaving. After a tense moment of silence, the villains swam to either side, giving them a clear path to shore. Sue jumped in without hesitation, wrapping her tongue around Mineta and pulling him in too. Hananuki and Midoriya were close behind, being careful to avoid the purple ball floating around them. They started to swim as fast as they could. Mr. Aizawa's words echoed in Midoriya's ears. Fabricated strengths can quickly become very real weaknesses. If a single one of these villains took the risk, they were done for. And they did. They must have realized they wouldn't dare blow them up whilst they were in the water too, and one lunged at Hananuki. Sue darted back and kicked the villain in the nose, still dragging Mineta around like a buoy, his purple head just sticking out of the water as he panicked and blew bubbles, just unable to breathe. But Midoriya had already thought through Plan B. Hananuki grabbed Midoriya's arm and they sunk down, right to the bottom of the fake lake. His ears popping and air running out, Midoriya could only hang in there whilst Hananuki softened the floor and yanked Midoriya underneath the concrete. Midoriya didn't dare open his eyes as Hananuki swam through the floor. He kept a firm grip on the hero student's wrist, trying to swim as fast as he could. Seconds before Midoriya was sure he would inhale the stone, he felt Hananuki harden the ground, push off it, and burst through the surface of the water. Coughing and spluttering even worse than before, the two hauled themselves onto dry land. As soon as he caught his breath, Midoriya said, "Where's?" But his unspoken question was answered instantly when Tsu landed artfully in the water just behind him, Mineta clinging to her side in a rather inappropriate manner and crying. Within seconds, he was catapulted onto land, and Tsu hopped out and glared at him for a moment. She then turned away, and "We're done here." She hopped off in the direction of the main exit, where Midoriya had earlier instructed they should head towards, leaving Mineta behind. "Well," Hananuki huffed, "that worked surprisingly well." "Not exactly," Midoriya winced, pointing out at the water. The villains were heading right at them. Hananuki gritted his teeth and took a fighting stance. "I'm on land, I can take them now." Midoriya hated that he didn't have more time to think this through. "Take Mineta and go after Tsu. Go the most direct way to the exit, around the central plaza to avoid the main fight. I'll go the other way. The villains are after me, I was the one who tricked them. We have a better chance if we split up." "But just go." Midoriya didn't give him the time to stop him. He didn't want Hananuki fighting them alone. They knew water well and liquidizing the ground might not be the best idea against such opponents. He kept running, as fast as he could, and Midoriya was a quick runner for a boy who wasn't that athletic and had no superpower to help him. As expected, the water villains did not have the same skill set. They must have either remained in the water or got caught up in the fight around the fountain, because Midoriya was not pursued. He could see the others from across the plaza, and they were okay too. That was when he spotted Mr. Aizawa. For an underground hero, not suited for situations such as this, he and Vlad King were doing incredibly well. There were so many villains, but none could lay a single scratch on the heroes. Midoriya just needed to stay well out of the way. It was better for everyone that he didn't get involved. But then he caught the eye of the villain with the hands, the one they first saw. Midoriya stopped in his tracks as the villain turned to him. This couldn't be good. The landslide zone was right behind him. Without a moment to waste, he turned tail and ran up the rocky slope and as far away from that horrifying gaze as humanly possible. He dove behind a large rock, hoping he'd be safe there, which was when the temperature plummeted, and he found his feet frozen to the ground, his damp clothes stiffening instantly. Shivering, he fell over. Still unable to move, he could only watch as a figure marched towards him from the mist the low temperature had conjured. He winced, preparing for the end, when Midoriya? He dared to look up. "Shoto?" His friend hauled him up and unfroze his feet. His hot, left hand melted the ice immediately, and in a burst of hot steam, Midoriya was finally warm again. "Thank you," Midoriya sighed, hugging his arms against his chest. "I was in the shipwreck zone, I got soaked." He glanced around. "Is anyone else with you?" "No," he said simply. "Great, then let's get back to the exit." Quickly before Shoto grabbed Midoriya's arm and held him back. "No. No, I don't. I'm leaving," he said firmly. "Whilst I have the chance, I'm getting out of UA." He let go of Midoriya, who just stood there and stared. "But why?" Shoto frowned. "Why? Midoriya, you must have said it yourself. This is a prison. I don't belong here. So, I'm leaving before they try and turn me into something I'm not." "But where will you go? Where do you think?" "Dabi will help me." Midoriya didn't know Shoto's story, at least, not all of it. Not the truth that Shoto knew. But there was a strange excitement in his friend's eyes when he said this. Midoriya couldn't remember him displaying such emotion before, even if this was slight. And he couldn't deny, the prospect of fleeing UA was interesting. But he couldn't not now. He'd never make it. The only way would be siding with this league of villains, and he couldn't want that, right? "Shoto, you can't." Midoriya pleaded. Not now. I'm not asking for you to try and stop me, he snapped, the temperature dropping again as he said so. He sighed, exhaling steam, and then extended a hand to Midoriya. I'm asking if you wanted to come with me. We're villains, Midoriya. He stared at Shoto, unsure of what to say, so instead he only listened. What do you think Yue will do for me? With my history and my family, there is nowhere for me to go. I won't be a hero like father. I won't just slip into society and hide my face. If I stay here, I will end up somewhere worse. This is my chance to get out. Shoto. And what about you? Shoto interrupted, a strangely worried look in his dual-colored eyes. Do you think this world will be kind to you? Has it ever been? Midoriya stared at him. He hated how right he was. Quirkless and marked as a villain, Midoriya had little hope for a bright future. He'd been ignoring it for a while now, but Shoto really brought it out into the open. I know, Midoriya sighed, hanging his head, but leaving like this will only make things worse. And what about the others? Would you just leave them behind? They've made it very clear that they're happy at UA, Shoto snapped. Class A can give them something, but you and I are different. I know. Midoriya replied. But they'll fail us if we try to leave. Especially with this League of Villains around. They'll think we're on their side. Aren't we? He stared, mouth slightly open, lost for words. Midoriya couldn't agree, but he couldn't disagree. He was so confused. Aren't we? I don't know. Midoriya shouted. He hesitated and pulled at his hair. I don't know. But I haven't figured it out yet, but I don't want to be like them. He pointed at the villains back at the plaza, still locked in battle against the two UA teachers. I'm not a villain. You're not a villain, Shoto. So, you're on the hero's side, Shoto concluded, a coldness returning to his eyes. No, Midoriya retorted instantaneously. I'm not on anyone's side. I'm on my side. Shoto, if I leave now, I'm throwing away any chance UA could give me. And I know whatever chance that may be is probably not the best, but I still want to know what it is. I'm not sure yet, but I don't have someone like Dabi on the outside. I think my mother has had enough disappointments as it is. Shoto actually gave him a soft smile. Mine has too. Midoriya smiled back at him sadly. Goodbye, Midoriya, Shoto nodded. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. He swallowed the lump in his throat as his friend turned away. Good luck. But then there was a scream, and the two boys turned back to the plaza. Vlad King lay in a pool of blood that Midoriya feared was his own, and Mr. Aizawa's head was in the clutches of the giant, bird-faced man with the exposed brain, his arm twisted and broken. The man with the many, ornamental hands began to stroll towards him. Mr. Aizawa. Midoriya breathed, and before he knew what he was doing, he'd ran down the hill to the edge of the plaza, where countless villains lay unconscious and defeated. Vlad King's quirk was a peculiar one. He had complete control over his own blood and could eject and harden it at will. He had much stored in tanks strapped to his back and had used it to trap numerous enemies. But excessive quirk use must have left him lethargic. It made sense, considering the nature of his abilities. He'd been knocked unconscious and tossed aside like a rag doll, whilst Mr. Aizawa was caught by the villain he was now in the grips of. The one with the hands, Shigaraki, the mist villain had once called him, seemed far more interested in Mr. Aizawa's quirk. Your quirk really is so cool. To erase another's abilities just by looking at them? So many would kill for something like that. Oh, but you have a tell, it's your hair. It floats when you activate your power, which you have to keep your eyes open for. And the more you do that, the more you want to blink. Your student was right, you're not suited for this fight, Eraserhead. Midoriya saw Mr. Aizawa's eyes flash red at the villain who held him down, but it had no effect, and he yelled out in pain whilst he pressed on his broken arm. But your power has no effect on Nomu, Shigaraki leered. Not when he has multiple quirks. A million questions buzzed around Midoriya's mind, his legs frozen and eyes wide. He didn't know what he could do. A few seconds later, purple smoke billowed around them, and the warp villain appeared. I am sorry, Tamura Shigaraki. Class A seems to have no intention on betraying the heroes, They banded together, and one got out. There will be backup here soon. We have lost. Shigaraki stared at him for a moment. Kyuri, if you weren't so integral to this mission, I would have already reduced you to a pile of atoms, he hissed, scratching at his neck in a feverish state. We should retreat, whilst we have our chance. Midoriya started to back away. If they left, they'd leave Mr. Aizawa alone. All this trouble and All Might doesn't even bother to show up. Shigaraki exclaimed. No matter, and he turned to Midoriya, we can still wreck his pride. The villain was right before Midoriya in seconds, hand outstretched, centimeters from the tip of his nose before Midoriya could even think. A pillar of ice erupted between them, knocking the villain back. Shoto! Midoriya called out when he slid into view. He couldn't say anything in reply before the ice shattered into nothing but snow and dust, leaving Shigaraki free once more. He brushed the ice crystals from his shoulders. Well, Shoto Todoroki. I didn't think you, out of all of your classmates, would act so heroic. Shoto gritted his teeth and glared at the villain, as though daring him to say a word more. We can offer you a way out of here, Shigaraki continued. I'll disintegrate the tracker on your ankle and take you far away from these heroes that hold you back. That's why they really wanted to liberate class. Midoriya realized. They wanted Shoto, the Rouge son of the number 2 hero. If he were to join their villain group, well, they'd get the attention they desired. That was for sure. You just tried to kill Midoriya, Shoto snarled. If you think I'm going to trust you after that, then you're mistaken. Well, Midoriya was glad he was at least valued by someone. Shigaraki, the fog villain, Kurogyri, tried to interject. Shigaraki simply held a hand up to silence him, one of his real ones, rather than the gruesome decorations that he wore. You really want to stay here? Your friend is clearly on their side. Look at how he worries for his teacher. Midoriya's eyes flickered between Mr. Aizawa and Shigaraki. The hero was still awake, barely. Blood dripped down his forehead, his arm held crooked behind his back by the monster that was Nomu. Yet, he still watched the interaction. Let him go, Midoriya tried. You're running out of time. The other heroes will be here soon. See how they've already corrupted him? Shigaraki continued, ignoring Midoriya entirely. The only one who's been corrupted is you. Midoriya lashed out. Do you think this is some kind of game? We're not murderers. We're not villains like you. Oh, then why are you here? Midoriya hesitated, which made Shigaraki grin, knowing he'd hit a nerve. Shoto stepped forwards. No matter what you say, you can't convince us to join you. Let Mr. Aizawa go. Shigaraki simply sighed, and to everyone's surprise, said, Fine, Nomu, get off the hero. The mindless beast did as he was told, dropping Mr. Aizawa immediately, and looking up, seemingly for further orders. And Shigaraki pointed right at Midoriya, kill the kid. It all happened so quick, but at the same time, in slow motion. Mr. Aizawa cried out and desperately reached forwards, unable to step in. Shoto pushed Midoriya aside, about to send a torrent of ice at the attacker. Nomu was right in front of them in seconds, unfazed by the ice, a great, clawed hand outstretched. And suddenly Shoto was on the floor, Midoriya in Nomu's grasp. It hoisted him off the ground with ease, squeezing his ribs whilst Midoriya scratched and kicked at the tough, purple skin, desperate to escape. At which point, there was a crash and bang. Shigaraki ordered the Nomu to wait, whilst Midoriya's heart hammered against his chest. They all looked up at the exit, where the sound had come from. And there, at the top of the stairs, stood the number 1 hero. Everlasting smile, gone. It was All Might, and Midoriya had never thought he'd be so glad to see him again. Looks like this level isn't over after all, said Shigaraki. In moments, All Might was down the stairs. Any remaining villains were swept off their feet in an instant, the hero moving so fast that Midoriya couldn't even see him. Kindly release my student, the hero ordered, dropping the last thug to the ground and marching towards them. Your student? Shigaraki leered. This is a member of Class A, he's a villain. No, you are the villain. Put him down before I make you. Damn it. No. The villains had said they wanted to kill All Might. meaning they must have found a way to defeat him. Midoriya gazed at the eyes of Nomu, fixed on him unblinkingly. It could snap him like a twig at any moment. Shigaraki had said the beast had multiple quirks. Was he the weapon they had to bring this pillar of justice to the ground? Meet Nomu, Shigaraki grinned. He will be your end. But he didn't say anything else, because instantaneously he was separated from the heroes with a wall of ice which crept up Nomu, only stopping at the hand that held Midoriya in his vice-like grip. Shoto had come to his rescue, yet again. All Might lunged forwards without a second thought. With unfathomable power, he aimed right at the beast's stomach, but the punch never landed. A portal appeared at the last second, redirecting the hero's quirk and obliterating the fountain. Midoriya sensed a hint of irony in the whole situation. Then there was another bang, a sound far more familiar to Midoriya's ears, when in a ball of smoke of flame, Kurogiri was tossed across the plaza. "Make another move and they'll be piecing you together for weeks," yelled Kaken. He'd restrained the teleporting villain, a deadly hand pinning him to the floor by the metal brace he wore around his neck. He must have been using his fog to obscure his real body. Kaken may have been a brute and a bully, but he was still rather smart. Soon enough, two other figures surrounded Kurogiri. There was Kirishima, his arm hardened with his quirk, and mirroring him entirely, a hero student beside him, his own arms now made entirely of metal. There wasn't a moment to lose. All Might took the opportunity as soon as it presented itself, and finally landed a punch on Nomu's arm. The ice shattered and took with it the entire limb. Midoriya dropped to the ground and scrambled out of the limp hand, horrified. He felt Shoto grab his shoulder and pull him to his feet. The two backed away as they watched on. Nomu did not make the slightest indication that he felt pain. In fact, only a few seconds later, pink muscle stretched from his shoulder, knotting around itself, and growing into an entirely new arm. He could regenerate. "You have met your match, oh so mighty, symbol of peace." Shigaraki laughed manically. "Nomu, kill him." Midoriya could only shield his eyes as the fight began. Both titans moved with such speed that he could have been blown away. They cracked the ground beneath their feet, each blow stronger than the last. Standing here was no good to anyone. "Come on!" Midoriya exclaimed. He pulled Shoto forwards, and they ran around the scene, quickly falling to Mr. Aizawa's side. "We need to get him away from here," Shoto realized. "And Vlad King too." Midoriya's eyes flickered across the plaza. The second hero wasn't far, but there was no way they could get both teachers to the exit fast enough to avoid the battle waging on, especially with Shigaraki still nearby. Luckily they had help. "I'll get Sir Vlad," and a beast-like hero student thundered past, scooped Vlad King off the floor, and charged towards the exit. "Yaoyorozu!" Midoriya exclaimed as she arrived, skidding to a halt beside them and dropping a sword to the ground with a clatter. "I'm sorry, I was with Jiro and Kaminari." He short-circuited himself and Jiro's taking him back to the others. "I'll help with Mr. Aizawa." She had clearly been through a lot. Her trousers had been harshly ripped into shorts, possibly by a knife of her own creation or perhaps the sword. Her jacket was unbuttoned, but she seemed unbothered by showing off her black sports bra. She needed exposed skin to create anything large. This skill was used moments later, when she managed to pull a folded-up stretcher from her stomach. Midoriya just stared. She really was so cool. He helped haul Mr. Aizawa onto the stretcher. "Let's get as far away from this fight as we can," Yaoyorozu insisted. "We should carry Mr. Aizawa up to the exit. Nearly everyone else has gathered there now." "There's no way we'll be able to make it up there," Shoto retorted when Nomu crashed into the stairs, but bounced back up again as if it had only been a playful nudge. "Maybe I should have told Shishida to try and take Mr. Aizawa as well." Yaoyorozu stressed, obviously referring to the hero student who had swooped in to rescue Vlad King. He didn't exactly wait for instructions. Midoriya paid little attention, eyes locked on the fight before him. Each blow sent out a gust of air that continued to be powerful enough to knock anyone in the vicinity to the ground. But they seemed to be at an impasse. Both were equal in power, and neither seemed to be on the road to victory. Shigaraki started to scratch at his neck. This clearly wasn't going the way he had hoped. But Midoriya knew better. better than all of them. For All Might had a time limit, one which he had already wasted that morning, hence him being late to the US. Just how much longer could he hold out for? Yet the beast started to inch backwards, his power slowly overcome by All Might's own. And not long after, with a cry and crash, the finishing blow was dealt, and Nomu hurtled through the ceiling, leaving All Might standing victorious before them. And no one, not even Midoriya, could deny how incredible the #1 hero was. He stood amongst the smoke and dust left in Nomu's wake, brushing the blood of his cheek, and he turned to Shigaraki. "No," the villain muttered. "No, no, no. It's over," All Might proclaimed. "Surrender, now." But Midoriya looked closer. Amongst that dust, he could see it, the steam coming off the hero's body, the way he trembled, ever so slightly. His weakness, his time was up. Shigaraki's blood-red eyes flickered around the scene. He saw All Might standing before him, the hole left in the ceiling of the dome, the group still struggling to keep Kurogyari at bay, and then of course, Midoriya and the others not that far behind him. "I hate you," said Shigaraki, his fists trembling as he seethed in. His anger. Only Midoriya could see the coughs All Might was repressing. "No, no. This isn't over." Only Midoriya could see the blood trickling from the corner of the hero's lips. "I hate you." And Shigaraki charged. A power that could disintegrate Shoto's ice in seconds. And All Might had no strength left. All Might would die. Which is why Midoriya, in a split-second decision, scooped Yairozu's sword off the floor and skidded between the two, raising the blade in defiance. His friends cried out in surprise, but they didn't know what he knew. Midoriya pivoted as Shigaraki reached him, swinging his sword with all his might, whilst the hero stood behind him, unable to move. Seconds before the villain's deadly hands reached Midoriya's body, before his blade could pierce Shigaraki's skin, there was a flash of purple, the ringing sound of a gunshot, and a blinding pain in his shoulder. Midoriya fell to the ground, rolling on his side. Gunshots fired around him. Shigaraki was engulfed in a whirlpool of violet smoke, and before Midoriya knew it, he was gone. Midoriya! That was Shoto, or Yairozu, or both. But Midoriya could only grip his left shoulder, oozing red. He heard footsteps, and a rumble like an earthquake, before the concrete rose up around him, forming a great wall between him and the others. Midoriya had been shot. He'd been shot. The pain was like nothing he'd ever felt before. With watery eyes, he managed to lift his head. His eyes met those of All Might, now sunken in his skeletal, weaker form, his once skin-tight hero costume now baggy and ill-fitted. And Midoriya saw the other heroes, rushing onto the scene. It wasn't one of the villains who'd shot him. It had been a hero. The purple Kurogyari. He must have managed to escape and come to Shigaraki's aid, perhaps redirected a bullet right at Midoriya, before disappearing altogether. All Might stepped forwards. "Young Midoriya? Stay away from me!" Midoriya screamed, grasping the sword and pointing it in the hero's direction, his arms shaking as he bit back the pain. He hesitated. "It's okay, I'm not going to." Stay back." Midoriya whimpered. Tears rolled down his cheeks whilst the blood soaked his clothes. All Might drew closer, and Midoriya desperately tried to crawl away, not relinquishing the blade. The hero fell to his knees before him. "I'm not going to hurt you." Midoriya's breathing grew erratic. You've already done that, haven't you?" He didn't mean the gunshot, and All Might knew that too. "Why you already done that?" And he dropped the sword, slipping into the darkness. "Where's Midoriya?" Shoto exclaimed. They were outside the USJ now, and they had been for almost an hour. All of Class A had been corralled into a corner, and Class B was nearby, but Midoriya was nowhere to be seen. "He's going to be okay," insisted the police officer, or possibly detective, in the trench coat and matching hat. "Recovery girl is seeing to him now." "But did he jump in like that?" Yairozu wondered aloud. All Might barely had a scratch on him. He would have been able to defeat Shigaraki, surely. Shoto turned to her, his gaze cold. He must have had a reason. He simply couldn't be that foolish. Or was Shigaraki right after all? Maybe Midoriya was more of the reckless hero type than Shoto realized. He wasn't sure how to feel about it. And Mr. Aizawa? Uraraka perked up. The detective nodded. He has been taken to hospital. Him and Vlad King both had serious blood loss, but I know your teacher well. Have faith in him. With that, he was called away by another officer, whilst they detained numerous thugs. You really want to stay here? Your friend is clearly on their side. Look at how he worries for his teacher. Shoto stayed behind. Why did he do that? His only chance, gone. And Dabi wasn't coming for him. No way. Shoto would have to get out on his own, and Dabi would help from there. But how could he do that now? Are you okay, Shoto? That was Ida. His hair was scruffy and his glasses askew. It made sense, he'd ran for help, after all, and the main school was quite far from here. Shoto looked away. I'm fine. I can't believe I didn't short-circuit my phone, laughed Kaminari, who was standing just behind Shoto. There were scorch marks all over his PE kit. He tossed the brick phone up in the air and caught it again repeatedly. These things are indestructible, gaped Kirishima. From what Shoto had heard, he, Bakugo and Tetsutetsu from Class B had faced numerous villains alone, yet Kirishima's phone didn't have a dent in it. Mine was in the shipwreck zone, said Tsu, but it still works, ribbit. It's honestly impressive, Kaminari replied with raised eyebrows. Shoto pulled his own from his pocket. He gazed at the red number 15, painted across the back, for a moment. They're kind of useless, really, Jiro insisted. That electric villain jammed the signal so we couldn't even contact Miss Midnight. Why is she the only other contact we have? Pondered Mina. Miss Midnight is our substitute teacher in case of Mr. Aizawa's absence. Ida explained, chopping his hand through the air. It is likely that we will be seeing more of her over the next few days. Sound good too? Tsu slapped Mineta from the other side of the group, beating Jiro by moments, who later jabbed her earphone jacks at Mineta's eyes for good measure. All in all, Tsu sighed once they'd finished beating Mineta up and had received numerous nervous glances by Class B and the surrounding officers. It's safe to say that was a terrible field trip. The worst field trip ever, Mina nodded. Of all time, finished Zero. After a moment of silence, a bout of suppressed giggles rang out amongst them. Well, this is the least bored I've been all week, Jiro sighed, and they all laughed harder. Ida opened his mouth to yell at them but was swiftly beaten to it. You think this is funny? They all turned to Class B, where one that Shoto didn't know the name of, with messy brown hair, scowled at them. Both our teachers and one of your classmates were badly hurt, and we all almost died. Mina's, but we didn't, masked Ciro's mumbles of, if only. Settle down, the detective in the trench coat was back. Try not to provoke each other. And by each other, you mean them, right? Snarled another member of Class B. Any smiles on the faces of Shoto's classmates quickly faded. The detective sighed. We're going to have a short interview with all of you individually, he explained, getting right to the point. Somehow, this League of Villains knew that you'd all be at the, supposedly with all might. That means there must have been a leak of the schedule. Well then, the culprit is clear, Monoma spoke up, and Shoto scowled. He hoped he had some serious insecurities to validate the way he treated them. It's Class A, the villains were on their side. Come on, Monoma. As much as I agree that it wasn't one of us, not all of Class A are bad. Tetsutetsu exclaimed loudly, clearly referring to Kirishima. They essentially had the same quirk and already seemed to get along. Shoto just didn't understand people who could gain friends so easily. I need to speak to all of you, the detective insisted. I want to know all your accounts. The more information we have, the more likely it is that we can get to the bottom of this quickly. He locked eyes with Shoto, which was when he realized he knew this man. Detective Tsukachi, he'd questioned Shoto after he was caught by the heroes. Shoto vaguely remembered throwing a table at him. He couldn't believe he didn't recognize him sooner. The man had a truth quirk. If there really was a traitor among them, they'd be found quickly. Shoto frowned at his own thoughts. Traitor? What would they be betraying? It's not like they were on UA's side. I'm not on anyone's side. I'm on my side. It looked like Shoto would have more time to figure this out than he thought. Midoriya found himself in Recovery Girl's office as the sun set. She was far less stern with him than before and moved numerous energy gummy bears into his hand when she finally released him. His left shoulder was covered in bandages. They ran a little way down his arm and peeked out underneath his pea-top, ragged and stained. He ached, but the pain had almost disappeared. Recovery Girl had said healing broken bones was a cinch, and a bullet wound, despite requiring a little surgery, wasn't much worse. But he'd been told to take it easy, meaning he was excused from PE for at least a week. Luckily, it was his left shoulder, and he was right-handed, so his writing wouldn't be affected. But Midoriya was exhausted. Recovery Girl had said her quirk tapped into his stamina, but they both knew there was more to it than that. He bowed his head and averted his gaze even when Snipe, the hero with the accuracy quirk, came to apologize for his injury. Midoriya knew it wasn't his fault. He meant to hit Shigaraki, and would have, if Kurogiri hadn't swooped in at just the right moment to deflect the bullet. Although, the hero was quite confident he did hit the villain at least twice subsequently. Midoriya just shrugged, which hurt his shoulder. A permanent shadow seemed to linger over his face as he pushed past the heroes to wander the corridors of UA, back to the dorms. Midoriya! Ida called out when he finally reached Heights Alliance and kicked off his shoes. Hey! Midoriya replied simply. We were so worried, he continued, following him through the room whilst everyone got up to circle around him. How's your shoulder? Yaoyorozu asked nervously. We saved a plate for you. Uraraka interjected, gesturing to a plate of curry on the kitchen counter. Let me just put it in the microwave and… I'm not hungry, Midoriya interrupted. She blinked at him, but… You need the energy. Ida insisted. At least try and have. I don't want it. Midoriya pushed past him, and the group parted to let him through. He walked right towards the stairs. He just wanted to go to bed. This was when he came face to face with Shoto. Midoriya stared at the stormy gray eye that he could see. The blue one was hidden beneath his hair. Why did you do it? He asked. Silence rang around them. They all waited for Midoriya's reply. He took a moment to answer, You don't know what I know. Midoriya noted how Shoto shifted his position, the hint of curiosity in his mannerisms. He waited as though hoping for further explanation. Then, what do you know? Uraraka asked. Midoriya turned to her. She had such concern in her big brown eyes. Sometimes it was so hard to believe she had once been one of the most wanted villains out of all of them. Jiro stepped forwards. Something about All Might? You stood in between him and that villain, right? Is something wrong? So, Jiro didn't know the same secret. Then, what did she know? What else were the heroes hiding? How weak were these haloed pillars of society? It's best to just keep yours and everyone else's secrets to yourself, Midoriya replied, repeating the words that Jiro had once said to him. He watched her hesitate, staring at him for a moment, as though trying to see the truth in his eyes. She backed off and nodded. So that's why you're here, Shoto realized. Like Jiro, you know something they don't want you to know. Among other things, Midoriya agreed tentatively. Oh yeah. Mineta spoke up. What else did you do? You don't even have a quirk, what else could you have possibly? Midoriya gave him his most fearsome glare, which actually caused him to flinch and jump a couple of steps backwards. I got tired of the way people were treating me, he barely whispered, giving Mineta a look as though to blame him of the same offense. I hacked into my school's security system, it wasn't hard. I just needed to teach myself how to do it first. Most of my old classmates have black marks on their records now, I'll haunt them forever, and one ended up here. A few eyes wandered towards Kaken, who stood in the background, watching and listening. As for my teachers, some were fired, and the entire school is still under investigation. I'm waiting for it to close down, it's only a matter of time. Oh, and that was after I publicly shamed a group of heroes for not doing their job properly. You won't find the video online, they took it down. But excuse me for still being confused as to why I ended up here. It's not like I got caught doing anything wrong other than being rather opinionated. And last time I checked, my quirkless existence isn't a crime, so, sorry if it inconveniences you, since you seem to point it out a lot. He crouched down to Mineta's height and continued to look him dead in the eyes, ignoring everyone else. I've had just about enough of people deeming me useless due to the lack of a weird and wonderful trait. I have plenty of other strengths, and I won't hesitate to use them against you if you dare to harass me or anyone else in my vicinity again. I can land people in this place. I can just as easily get them out, understand? He gulped and gave a slight nod. Midoriya just sighed. Good. He stood up and turned back towards the stairs. Thank you for saving dinner for me, it's appreciated. No one stopped him. No one dared to get in his way. Not even Shoto attempted to follow him. Midoriya reached his room and collapsed onto his bed, biting his lip harshly when he fell onto his injured shoulder. But all he could think of were the friendships he'd just lost. He didn't sleep. His alarm clock shone the digits of midnight in his eyes when he finally sat back up again. He'd heard doors slam shut around him an hour or so ago. He was still in his PE kit when he decided to leave his room and head back downstairs. He couldn't deny he was starving and hoped that Uraraka had put the plate of curry that Sato made in the fridge for him. But when he reached the common room, he found himself blinking at the faces of a majority of his class, staring back at him. He averted his gaze and started to walk towards the kitchen area, before a yellow t-shirt and a set of shorts appeared before him, seemingly floating in midair. We've been talking, said Invisible Hagakure. Midoriya sidestepped her and tried to walk past. He didn't like where this conversation was going. But he felt her invisible arm hold him back. What do you need to expel Mineta? He stared at her and blinked again. Excuse me? Sue told us what happened on the boat back at the USJ, said Kirishima, sitting on the arm of the sofa. His red hair wasn't spiking up like it did usually, due to the lack of hair gel at this time of night. He gritted his sharp, shark-like teeth and stared at the floor for a moment. It's not right. He practically suggested killing that guy from Class B. Even if he did say that because he was scared and saw no other option. It's not manly to imply killing someone to give yourself a better chance. I know we're not heroes here, but... And me and the rest of the girls are fed up too, Hagakure added, finally dropping her arm. We want him gone. So, said Jiro, what do you need? With our skill set, we can get you anything you want for it, Hagakure nodded. Midoriya gawked at them all. He didn't know what he expected to come of his confrontation with Mineta. He'd just had a really long day, and he just snapped. But this? He really needed to stop assuming his classmates would react like ordinary people. Just like him, they were more than what met the eye. Midoriya met Shoto's eyes. Like Kirishima, most of the gel had left his hair at this point. He still had it pushed over his scar, but with it down, he looked so painstakingly normal. He was leaning up against a wall, arms crossed. A slight smile stretched across his face when Midoriya did the same. What do I need? Well, it depends, Midoriya told Hagakure, turning back to her, and looking at where he assumed her eyes were. How quickly do you want him gone? She didn't falter, as soon as possible. He grinned, all you needed to do was ask.